That's my tag.
Yeah,
That's my
but
handle.
that's your well,
We're live.
handle your own handle. I still don't know where that came from when people started calling a name handle.
I heard that from a story from a woodworker that was at a party, and it was slightly hoity-toity, and they were talking internet and different platforms, and they came up to this guy and they said, "So, what's your handle?" And he found it so outrageously funny because they took it so serious. Well, my handle is,
Hmm.
uh, just the usage of the word in the context of that he found funny, and I always remember that every time I say the word handle.
Now I'm just trying to figure out where it came. Why did it come to mean that? And when? I haven't looked into it, but what can I say?
You're already stirring rabbit holes galore.
Oh my God, yes.
Rabbit hole galore sounds like an R-rated movie.
Yeah, it does. Ah, man. Well, what can you say?
I'm sorry. You have
What?
to really picture it in your mind before you.
Yeah, I don't know. Welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcasts with your host, Eloy Escajedo on the East Coast, and me. I found it on the West Coast.
Finally,
Yeah.
I have been waiting years for you to take over that freaking introduction because I'm like, at some point, it's like I say it the same darn way every time. Now it sounds fresh. You've just regenerated my outlook with by
Really?
you saying,
Really? It
yeah.
it just
I'm
takes something that's okay, cool.
well,
I'll
no, because
remember that
that's
one.
something I usually say as an introduction bit,
Mhm.
but you saying it you and me being the listener as opposed to the thing makes a whole world of difference. It makes a difference because oh yeah, that does make sense. Because at some point you stop the meaning, the true meaning. You are literally on the West Coast, and I am literally on the. But the more I say it year after
Mhm.
year, however long, it loses its oomph. Now that
Yeah.
you said that, you've regenerated that.
Well, I'm glad to do my part. Uh, I got to do something other than sit here and give it,
It's
waiting for
like
you to bring up
listening.
something. So
Well,
we never established any roles on this. It's not like you have your job, I got mine. We just kind of get in here and freeform it. And so you would start talking, and then welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcast, and this, that, and the other. And I just let you do it because it's like, all right, he's got that covered. Don't rock the boat, you know.
and I out of habit,
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, well, so you self-impose because now when we say our exiting thing,
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning I used to say only a portion of it, and then you would say and it would be almost a 50-50
Mm-hmm.
explaining where you can find us, this and that. But I think one day, for whatever reason, I don't know if you were coughing or sneezed, or I don't know what or maybe something else, I ended up saying this whole amount of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, from that point on, it just became
Yeah.
the unspoken rule,
Mm-hmm.
non-rule.
Yeah.
I don't know how that freaking happens, but now I
I,
feel obligated to say my bit
yeah. Me
as if
too.
it's very weird, dude.
Me too. I got to put my radio voice on, and I got to do a bunch of other weird stuff in the background. Then I
It's
get up,
ritualistic.
get up real close to the microphone, and I speak plainly and eloquently, which is very difficult for me. So, you know,
I want to throw something at you.
oh, okay. Well, I can duck real quick, but go ahead.
Okay. Um, I ran across. This is a brief aside, but I just want to say how, and it's in line with what we usually talk about in a general sense of remembering stuff and this and that.
Uh-huh.
I know there's a billion and change in terms of channels on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, but I ran across one called Vampire Robot or Robot Vampire Robot.
Okay.
That's the name of the channel.
Okay.
It is the best thing since sliced integral
Dry
fiber
salami.
bread. It's the best thing since fiber bread with little seeds in it.
Okay.
Um, it's basically a guy, and I think it's to do a lot with, and I'll tell you what it is, but I think it's to do a lot with the fact that he's documenting stuff. And I've gotten into this whole documenting vibe for the past 3 years, if you haven't noticed. But
Hmm.
so what he documents is videos. Apparently, it's more to do with the United States, across the history of the United States, throughout the decades, of people doing just doing things normally, such as, I don't know, shopping at Kmart in 1992. A man goes grocery shopping in 1972. A Walmart in the year 2000. And it's just footage that maybe news people had taken for their local stations,
Hmm.
and it's all the backing clips, because they'll do pickup clips where it's just people
Yeah.
moving about so that they
B
can then,
roll and things like that. Yeah.
and he lets it roll. A Woolworth in the corner of whatnot and whatnot in Miami, Florida, and you see people. I've heard Cuban ladies, like you'll see like the one that I'm saying, the Woolworth in downtown. You can hear the you can hear, but you have to, in order to find the humor in it, you'd have to like be of this area, because you can hear them going on about their normal things, just talking the most mundane things in the background. You say,
Uh-huh.
oh look, this is anybody would do it, but like in the context of the Cuban experience, oh look at this is pretty, what do you think? Well, no, she's not gonna like that. Like just little random things that are voyeuristic. It's such a great freaking channel, dude.
I just found it. And yeah, watching TV with the family in 2002, grocery shopping at an AMP store in 1982, browsing iPods at an Apple store in 2005, um, going to the movies in 1992, shopping for clothes at the mall in 1989. That looks like fun. Okay, I've got it bookmarked. I'm gonna check it out.
There's some cool stuff there, because it's almost the things that you and I, well, it's not even almost, it's exactly a similarity, or it's a similar experience that we would experience across the decades as we've
Mhm.
gone about our business. But it's peering in and saying, oh wow, yeah, yeah, but it's stuff that we wouldn't have thought twice about.
Yeah, just
And these
normal everyday life. Yeah.
Yeah, and these people in the videos are basically going on about their business while
Mhm.
being filmed, doing what people do, which is, I'm gonna just do my thing, but you're being recorded. I like that. That it's quite voyeuristic if you think about it, but there's a nostalgic thing to it
Yeah.
primarily.
Well, I mean, he's got 96,000 subscribers. I say he, I don't know who it is. Um, they've got 96,000 subscribers, fixing to turn over to 97,000. And some of these videos, I mean, 18,000 views here, 14,000 views there. People watching at the mall in 1996 has 160,000 views. So, yeah, I mean, there's some pretty cool things on here. I'm gonna check it out, and maybe we'll put a link to it over on the Facebook page. It
Yeah,
looks to be intriguing because you're right. So many of the things that we took for granted and just never thought about, like using a payphone. I mean, folks would be lost. Number one, how do you dial this sucker? There's no buttons on it. How does the rotary dial work? I got to
yeah.
put the money in before or after. Who the heck carries change anymore? You know.
There was an old dude in one video. He was at a supermarket with, and so I couldn't help but, it's the same old thing. Obviously, supermarkets existed before I was born,
Hmm.
in 1975. But um, I've mentioned this to you before. How many all the items around us, a good chunk of it, maybe most of them, yeah, most of them, have been around before our time,
Oh yeah.
but we don't equate it. I mean, off the bat, when we look at something, it's there now in the present, but we don't think of. And so, watching these videos, like the guy grocery shopping, you see the cans of Campbell soup,
Yeah.
and but little changes or little things that aren't quite the way they were, like the shopping carts. If you notice when you go to Walmart,
Right.
there's substantially big, so you can fit more crap in there.
Oh
And
yeah. Yeah.
but back then, at least in this store, it was like a little shopping thing. It's
Yeah.
like a little basket thing that you're walking around. It's not this monster thing, that you and so little things like that.
I can give you some insight into that. It's because as the decades have progressed, we have bought more prepackaged foods. So they had to make the carts bigger to hold the more packaging. We're buying less fresh fruit and vegetables and less fresh meats, and we're buying the packaged fruit. Boxes of macaroni and cheese take up a lot more space than a bag of elbow macaroni.
Right. Yeah.
And a box of chicken nuggets take up a lot more space than a package of chicken. So that's why the carts got. I mean, this is what happens when you have a father who was in retail for 35 years. Uh, just, I mean, I don't even remember when he told me that, but it was just in passing. Yeah, we got bigger carts in. I'm like, why do you need bigger carts? He says, there's so much packaging now. People complain. I mean, do you remember? I'm sure you've seen it. You would occasionally see people pushing two shopping carts, or they'd be like a husband and wife and they would both have a shopping cart, or
I
one
mean,
person doing the shopping and dragging around two carts.
I've never seen that I can recall.
I haven't seen it in about 20 years.
It almost seems unnatural, but
Yeah, it is. It's not super common. I don't think it ever was super common, but I haven't seen it in about 20 years. Unless, you're talking holiday season, in which case, yeah, you buy 5 gifts and they're in humongous boxes. You do need two carts, or you need two employees to meet you at the front door with it. But yeah, it as packaging got bigger and bigger and more and larger, we needed bigger carts to carry the same amount of came this to carry the same week's worth of groceries.
I'll tell you something I I've experienced that you have not, and you correct me if you have, but you got to be a straight shooter on this one. I want to see if
Well, what have I ever lied to you
and I would never
intentionally?
I would never know either way
Yeah,
because
well, there's that. So
well, but here's the question, and see what you say. You have never in your life. I love how it's such an absolute
step
question.
foot in your house. You're right. I haven't.
I love setting up these absolute questions just to
Hmm.
see what people say. You have never in your life, Mark, gone shopping with a cart, shopping cart that has a pole attached to it.
Yes, I have.
Damn it, Mark.
Poles that so you couldn't take it out of the store. Yes, I have.
I tried.
Um, Kmart's, some Kmart's had them. There was a little, God, I'm trying to remember the name of the Payless drugstore. I don't know who bought them out, but Payless
Oh,
drugstore, they
that's
had the
right.
poles.
Wait a second. That's right. And also, back in the day, you didn't have Eckerd drugs, but it was the
No.
equivalent of what a name too.
Hmm.
Um, but those kind of like CVS stores that you
Hmm.
might have over there,
Yeah.
it was the equivalent of the CVS stores.
Yeah. Yeah. Payless drugs was very similar to that. I mean, yeah, you had a pharmacy counter, and yeah, you had all the cold remedies and, cough medicine and ace bandages and, first aid and things like that. And then off to one side, off to one aisle, you had makeup. And then you had 2, 3 aisles of stationery. And then you had 2 aisles of toys. Some of them even had like sporting goods, like fishing poles and things like that. You could go down there and buy a basketball or a football or what have you. So it was a kind of a variety store with the pharmacy counter,
Yeah.
and it was one of my favorite places to go because I knew every time I went there with my grandmother, at the least, I was going to get one of those little balsa wood airplanes that had the plastic propeller with the rubber band on it that, survived for maybe 20 minutes out in the backyard.
There was a lot of cool little things
And
like
and
that in
and
those like, outings.
and I remember those with the propeller. You could get the glider, they were 10 cents, and the ones with the propeller were a quarter.
There used to be a little Superman toy with a plastic cape. Do you remember
Hmm.
those? It was Superman, but instead of the cape being something like cloth,
Hmm.
it was just plastic.
Yeah.
Do you even remember something like that? Or maybe that was more closer to my
I
time.
think that was closer to your time. Um, we did have, now I'm trying to remember if it was Superman, but you got like a wooden stick with a rubber band hooked to the top of it.
And it would helicopter up.
And yeah, well, yeah,
Eh,
and there were a couple of them that were superheroes, the flying superheroes,
I had
but
all those sets.
most of them were just little weird looking helicopter things.
Do you remember? Um, it was a handle with a metal thing that curved up, and there was a some wheel with two little prongs,
Oh yeah,
and you
Wheelo.
yeah,
Yeah, and it had the two rails went up and then
yeah.
came back towards the handle, and it had the little wires separated,
There was
and the
kind of
little wheel would go
resistance.
down the other side. Yeah, it was all magnet.
You could feel that when you
Hmm.
made it turn, it had its resistance and stuff.
This is how easy I was. I thought it was cool when I got a yo-yo that had that lit up. It had little contact switches inside, and when as it spun, it would light up. The sides would light up.
Hmm.
You
I
know,
remember that too.
we were so easy to please back then. If it made noise and flashed lights, I was all for it.
I remember watching the girls, the kids, the boys did their thing, and then the girls did their thing. And I remember watching the girls, and they go out to the sidewalk and they play jacks.
Mhm.
And I always was fascinated by the. I'd watch the jacks. And I want jacks, but you know, it's a girls' game. I mean, it is and it isn't, but but the jacks kind of looked like little landmines for like
Mhm.
war,
Yeah, little tank obstacles.
and so stuff like that. And so I think I ended up buying it, but it's like it's one of those things where
Well, when you stop and think about it, I don't know how it became a girls' game. I kind of do, but I kind of don't get it. My that aunt I was telling you about, she taught me how to play jacks when I was like 4 years old. Bounce the ball and try to pick up the specific number of jacks. We're going to pick up one this time. Then now we're going to bounce it and pick up two before the ball comes down. So you had to bounce the ball, pick up the designated number, then catch the ball.
yeah,
And if it came down and bounced, it was the next person's turn. You
it's
know,
incredible.
so it's kind of contest against yourself. You got to have good hand and eye coordination. And but then again, we were boys. We would take that ball and we'd bounce it up till it hit the telephone wire or something like that,
Yeah,
and pick them all up, and then
but
run into the neighbor's yard.
those little, I guess you'd say at those discount stores, those little off this to the side toys,
Hmm.
those things, I mean, everybody took those home because kids were like, oh, I want this, and they were probably priced at such a point where parents said, oh, just to keep this one
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah, and that's exactly right. That's what I was talking about. Those little balsa wood airplanes. I probably destroyed half of a rainforest full of balsa wood trees, but it was 10 cents. It was a nickel. It was a quarter maybe. You know, it was no big deal. It wasn't like, today where everything's radio controlled or you ride on it and it was several $100s.
My old
So,
man, we I don't know where or what, or I think he came home with this long plastic package, and it had this thing inside of it all rolled up, and it was a kite.
mhm,
And he says, "We're gonna fly a kite. You want to fly a kite?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, fly a kite." And so he set it up. I forget the at this point, but and then he 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 told me run, and I couldn't get the thing to fly up, and so he took it and he did it, and he started playing with it, and it
mhm,
was up in the air, and I'm looking, and I'm like, I want to hold it, and he's like, you got to hold on to it, you got to hold, like, the whole experience.
mhm,
But the reason I'm saying that, apart from that, is that he mentioned something, things that stick to your in your head. He says, when we were kids, son, we used to tie razors to the end of those, and we'd have competitions to try to slice the enemy kite down. And that's something that we never did here in Sweetwater. At least I didn't do. But that gameplay with danger involved as a kid, I was like, wow, that's gotta be cool as hell. I mean, it's something from back in the day.
They still do that in India.
Really?
They still do that in India. Now, the practice is banned except for one special time of the year. And it's like a 5-day period. And they have a festival out of it, but they don't tie razors to it. What they do is they coat the string with broken glass. And you try to get up there and you cut the string of the other kite.
Right.
And they can even use metal, they can use wire for kite string for a certain distance. And it's all about trying to dodge the other guy, but it's been banned for all of the year except for like this 5-day festival. They can get out and do it because people were getting hurt. I mean, it was pretty
It
bad.
it's it sounded what my dad said. It sounded pretty freaking, but
Pretty savage, yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how they had fun back in the 40s and
Well,
50s.
sure. I mean, what else are you going to do? You make your own fun because entertainment was. I mean, did he ever talk about going to the movies? I mean, because going to the movies for me as a kid, that was a treat. That was something that, holy cow, we get to go to the movies. And you did it 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah, they had a movie theater in their town,
Hmm.
but I don't remember the names of the movies. But I think there was a lot of cowboy stuff
Hmm.
back in the 50s when he was growing up,
Hmm.
and that cowboy influence, that concept of that whole world, the western,
Yeah.
um, was something that prevailed in
Hmm.
terms of entertainment and whatnot. My grandfather used to read, like, novels,
Hmm.
cowboy and Indian type novels.
Yeah.
So there was that, but I don't remember the movies exactly
Yeah.
that he.
Okay.
I could
Okay.
imagine it was movies from the 1950s, 40s,
Yeah.
and 50s.
Well, westerns reigned supreme up into the early '60s. So yeah, that's completely and totally understandable. Now let me ask you this: um, you kind of sort of answered it with the kite, but maybe not. Did your dad ever bring home a toy, supposedly for you, but you could just tell he brought this home for him. He wanted to play with it, but he had to get you involved just to give it some kind of legitimacy. You know what I mean?
He brought home. I mean, this is not exactly the answer, but one time when the Atari was all the rage, the
Hmm.
first one,
Yeah.
he brought that home. But it's weird because, and he set it up and he played a little bit with it, and I was like, no, let me play, and he kept playing. Oh no, let me play, because it's always now. I want to play now, 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 now,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
but he kept playing the game, and to me, it felt like an eternity. It was probably just a short little while. Him, in retrospect, him seeing my reaction and enjoying that he's gonna give, but and he gave me the controller and stuff and whatnot, and I started playing, but he never said, "Hey, this is yours."
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, even at that age,
Yeah.
there's been things that have been weird that I can't quite, that I've not sat through and answered to myself why. But even at that age, I don't know if there's things like that where there's certain things that you understand, whether it's true or not that you understand it a certain way, but that you come to a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I always, this idea of, if I'm not explicitly told, it's almost like, it's like duck duck goose.
Mm-hmm.
You know you're not the goose unless they tap you and they say you're goose. So even though you're participating in the game,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I'm saying? You're not.
You know your role, and you know you're not the other role until you're called upon to play that role. Yeah.
Right. So I didn't know that this was mine
Uh-huh.
when in fact it
Yeah, I get that.
was.
I get that. I do get that.
Yeah, he never explicitly said, "And son, this is yours." And so even while I was still under the impression that I'm borrowing this,
Mm-hmm.
but in reality, you know what I'm saying? It was just
Well, it's
in
not like it was Christmas and he said, "Here's your present."
right.
He just brought it home. My
Yeah.
dad did that with me. Oh my God, I was 5 or 6. And he brought home a Hot Wheels track. I'd never heard of Hot Wheels. I didn't know what it was. To me, the only little model cars were Matchbox. I'd never heard of no Hot Wheels. But he saw this thing and he bought it. And he's like, "Here, check that out. This is what we're going to do." And, we got one of the kitchen chairs and drug it out into the living room, and he clamped the little controller track onto it. We put together the pieces of track, and it came with like 4 cars. And we spent the whole damn day, me, him, and my brother, we spent the whole day playing with that ding dong thing. But I know he brought it home because he wanted to play with it.
Yeah, and live vicariously also watching
Yeah.
the joy.
Uh huh. But
Yeah,
it
I
was
could
funny
totally.
thinking back on it now. He had one car, and I don't remember what it was. I had another car. My brother had another car. And the loser got to play dad on the next turn.
That's fun stuff.
So dad always played, and my brother and I switched off. Dad never swapped off with me or my brother. He was always in there. That's how I knew. Oh, he bought this because he wants to play with it.
So another thing that's weird, or because I know it always was, where you get commercials on TV, kids get inspired and
Mhm.
they nag their parents, and
Sure.
many are sure to oblige because it's their children,
Mhm.
or wait till Christmas, whatever. But
Mhm.
just prior to, and we've talked about this before, but it is an important, especially in this type of conversation about childhood games and
Mhm.
toys and such. Just prior to the 1980s explosion of commercials, or I'm sorry, apart from commercials, cartoons being geared at the level that they were for people to purchase
Yeah.
toys for their children,
Mhm.
where it became this incredible up ramp industry,
Mhm.
which I coincided with perfectly at
Mhm.
my age. It was very powerful stuff,
Yeah, it was.
because if you see GI Joe, the cartoon, now you want the toy, and you're gonna put.
And they knew that. Yeah.
Well, so just prior to all that, when we had a situation where, yeah, maybe a Sesame Street
Mhm.
thing, and maybe but when we didn't have that much influence from outside and we were younger, um I've also thought the things that excited our adult predecessors in terms of fun and games and toys and such,
Mhm.
in a sense, they informed us about that, or transmitted that to us, or tried to. Um, in this way that you're saying, where they buy a thing and this and that. Because I remember, and I'll just say this one, I remember at my in Little Havana, we went over to visit my grandparents, and it was Christmas time or whatnot, and they had gotten me a toy train
Mhm.
set, and it was a big box. And there was nothing like opening these big boxes with the styrofoam, but then inside is all the toys packaged and stuff. And he started preparing the tracks and the whole thing. And while he was doing, so two things. Well, one thing, I had no idea about trains. I'm a
Yeah.
little kid, but it's not. It wouldn't be a first go to unless you see one and stuff. You might be, but you know, they bought that because they enjoyed it too. And I learned the story because they told me when he was little. My dad was little. My grandparents owned a store, and my grandfather at one point had the idea of selling toys. There's a road that ran through that area of Cuba, and then you have a lot of countryside, and then there's another town. But you have populations living there,
Mhm.
and they want to buy toys for their kids. And there's far and few between stores.
Yeah.
And my grandparents decided to sell toys, but they went full on. Instead of getting, because other stores had toys, but instead of getting regular toys, they went for broke, and they started buying train sets and dolls with their eyes, like all the trimmings.
Hmm.
And it became the store that sold the most toys during Christmas time
Because they had the big toys.
because they had the big toys, and part of that was the trains. So
Hmm.
my father grew up loving trains
Okay.
because he had the toy, and so he passed that on to. So what I'm getting at is that a lot of stuff is passed on to this knowledge or this
Yeah.
enjoyment or this is passed on in ways like that.
I didn't get into trains. I got into slot cars pretty much because it used to be a thing. You remember the arcades, of course, of the 80s. Go in and play the video games and what have you.
Yeah, hell
In the
yeah.
50s and up until about the mid 60s, there were similar setups that had big, huge slot car tracks. And you go in with your car, you use their controller, and they would have organized races, and then they'd have just free open. Anybody can come in with a car. You paid for a little bit, put in a couple of quarters, and you're in lane 4. Okay, lane 4 is turned on. And there was like a catwalk up above the track, and if somebody's car went off the track, it was some kid's job to go get that car, put it back on that lane, and then
Yes.
you could take off and go again. Well, then suddenly uh, home slot car tracks became a little bit less expensive. And I can remember, oh my God, I must have been 3 or maybe 4. My dad brought home a slot car track and played with it in the living room. And I was the kid that chased the car when dad sent it off, spinning around a corner, and it flew off the track. Well, I wanted one. I wanted one bad. We moved down to California, and I was probably 7 or 8. My dad bought me a set. And God is my witness, I played with that sucker until I went into the army when I was 20 years old.
That's great.
I kept buying more cars and adding track to it. But I was always that guy who was never happy with the track layout. I liked building the track almost as much as I liked racing the cars.
They went in there. They had a little connector that
Hmm.
allowed you to. Is that the one that you're talking about, where it would connect with the track? There's a slot in it, and but
Uh,
the car itself or the train or whatever the vehicle has a little um thing that sticks out. It basically makes magnetic or some sort of. I can't remember exact. I had something like that. Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, it was a little like a 12-volt DC thing, and the track had a literal slot that ran.
Yeah,
around
and you
each
can
piece.
disassemble and
And
move
then
them
it
around.
had, yeah, and it had two metal strips alongside of that
Hmm.
track, and the car had a little pin or a blade
Yeah,
that dropped down into that slot, and two little brushes that stuck down and made contact with with those metal strips, and that made power for the car. And
yeah.
I see Steve said he loved the old Tyco slot cars. I was into the Aurora AFX HO scale, so the cars were about Hot Wheel size, maybe a little bit smaller, but generally speaking, right about the same size. And oh my God, I bought so much additional track. And then you had pylons that you could stack up underneath sections of track and make big bridges. And I mean, you could spiral corners up and then bring a straightaway down. And I mean, it was just crazy to come up with different track layouts.
Yeah.
Um, my ex-wife used to tease me about it because I mean we had a little shed in one of the places we lived in, one of the houses we rented. There was a little shed, and I wouldn't put anything in that shed. I had sawhorses and plywood set up, and that was my racetrack area. And I was a grown adult, I was still out there playing with those things.
I mean, those are. I mean, the level of awesomeness and nostalgia from those simple pleasure. I even liked. Remember the little tin wind up robots, or
Oh yeah.
some were made out of plastic, but there were tin ones too.
Yeah.
I used to love those.
Oh yeah. Had a robot that would walk, and then he'd walk a certain distance and suddenly stop, and then his chest would pop open, and it was like two plastic machine guns would sit there and start lightning up, and you'd hear da 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 da, da, and then it would close, and he'd walk again. You know.
Did you make explosions with your sound explosions with your mouth?
Oh God,
If
yes. Oh yeah, and
okay,
machine guns and dropping bombs and airplanes and all that other stuff.
if
My
you
my friends and I would spend an hour, half hour, just a dirt bank in somebody's backyard or just, out somewhere. There'd be a
you
dirt bank. We would dig little tunnels and we would set up little machine gun nests and stuff like that.
you didn't need any encouragement to do all that, did you?
No, we just did it. And, with the 200 of those green army men, the plastic army men, and then we get back about, 20 feet away, 15 feet away, and just start throwing rocks at them and just blow up. Oh, I got the machine gun nest. Oh, I knocked that dude into the tunnel. Oh,
You
just
know,
whatever.
I just will say this is not a stretch in my opinion, but will sound could sound like a stretch and stuff. So, and it's also grabbing from another place, you know, away from where we're at. But I just say you guys and really it's a big group of people.
Mhm.
Um, Nobody has to tell us
Mhm.
to the bombs and the explosions and the this and
Oh
that.
no, we got it from TV. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would say this is kind of not abstract, but I'll say it. It's almost um we are the descendants,
Hmm.
maybe not within 100 years and stuff, but going back of people that ransacked whole areas of Europe
Hmm.
and basically just dominated the landscape. We the original. I hate to, what I'm saying is that could it be that a part of it is deep with it because there's no
Yeah.
pick a guy across anywhere
Mhm.
and explosion and all that stuff. I was doing that like
Yeah.
my aunt
Dude.
still tells me when you were little you were like
Yeah, it was the same way. I mean, and the imagination is a wild thing. I can see in my brain some Neanderthal kids, 6, 7 years old, putting leaves up against a dirt bank and throwing rocks at them to knock them down.
Yeah.
I mean, I I can see that happening. Maybe they weren't making noise because they didn't know what an explosion sounded like. But boom, that's kind of universal.
I could totally see that as well
You know,
across
I mean,
the epochs.
and my parents didn't care because where else can you find a group of 7, 8, 9-year-old kids throwing rocks, not at each other? I mean, we all had a common target, and that's the funny part is we're all 6, 7, 8, 9, something like that. Some of the neighborhood girls were right there with us. I mean, it didn't matter. We're just, yeah, boom, boom, that kind of thing. But we would, I mean, do some elaborate stuff, and you knock everything down, you go set it up again, you do it some more.
Yeah. I mean, but could you imagine nowadays, like, people have to sit down and have serious conversations over whether Timmy should get that toy gun, that
Well,
toy zapper. To me, I know, and there's serious. There's people that are very serious about that they don't want to.
yeah.
But in today's climate, you hear more of that.
Hmm.
But boy, I walked around town with a silver pistola
Uh-huh.
all up and nobody, none of the adults, no
Because
one, even
you weren't the only one.
no one thought even it wasn't even a consideration. Like the
Hmm.
connections that people make now about things like that
Hmm.
wasn't, and neither in my mind. I'm just playing with my toy gun.
Hmm.
I'm not thinking, boy, this will be good to knock down that whole jewelry store over there. It's
Yeah.
just, there are people, the people that do that as a, like the fear,
Hmm.
and I don't know this for a fact, but it feels like it's the direction that it might be true. But I'm not stamping it. Although, if I had to bet, I would stamp it 5 times. Um, People. So notice what I'm saying is that I believe it totally, but I know that I could be in error and maybe not. Um, I could totally, a person that holds up a jewelry store, that person, in a general sense, whether or not he played with toy guns as a kid, if you think of like a thousand kids,
Yeah. There are just some bad people out there.
exactly is what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
I mean, give me a break.
He were probably going to end up doing something like that anyway. Maybe not that dramatic or that drastic, but you've got to go back to cause and effect there, and I just don't know that you could prove either direction. I don't think you could prove that it did or it didn't have any kind of effect. But what can you say to that? I mean, that has been going on and off. That argument has been raging forever.
Your Honor,
Um,
your Honor,
but
my client is pleading insanity because when he was a kid, he had a toy gun with a red thing on the tip of it, and it traumatized him.
Um, I pleading insanity. This is a major diversion here, but kind of not. I know you're a comic book fan. The character Wonder Woman.
Hmm.
I cannot remember the name of the guy who came up with her.
Neither can I.
He was really obviously very, very popular. The character went crazy and this, that, and the other. In real life, he basic see now let me see if I've got this correct. No, I'm confusing two stories. Never mind. I'm confusing two stories and I
Oh
can't
damn!
get out of it.
I thought you
But
were gonna go
but
in a. Okay.
but he took the idea for that lasso of truth, and a couple of guys saw that, oh, the truth lasso, and they just kind of thought about that idea, and it directly led to the invention of the lie detector,
Oh wow!
the polygraph.
You're
But
such a lasso.
Just that whole concept about being able to detect the truth. And maybe there's some, well, maybe there's some biological means by which we can tell if someone is lying or not. And it was just that concept that made them go in that direction.
Wow.
There was another comic, it was Spider-Man, and I don't remember the name of the villain in this particular episode. It was in the comic books. The guy, the villain, put a bug on Spider-Man so he could track his whereabouts. And this judge of all people looked at that idea and went, "Oh my God, what if we did that to low level offenders to avoid prison overcrowding? We make a little tag that we can put on them that they can't remove." And that became the ankle bracelet for people under house arrest. He developed that after reading that Spider-Man comic book.
I mean, that's inspiring. Do you remember kids, or at least this is what they took? I don't know because I haven't even looked at, but it just reminded me. So Superman was a big deal,
Mm-hmm.
uh, even during my time. Well, because I'm experiencing it for the first time myself. But I remember one of my family members, it could have been my grandmother, I don't know what, but she emphatically said, it's only Superman that can actually fly. There's a kid that thought he could fly and he was up on a building and he jumped and he didn't make it. I remember being told that story and me thinking at
Yeah.
the time, what an idiot, like in my mind,
Yeah.
because no matter how much I'm playing Superman,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, even without logic, like being able to examine my own logic, it was natural for me to know that if I, regardless of whether I'm wearing a cape or not, if I
Mm-hmm.
jump my ass out of a window, sorry, out of
Yeah.
a window, I know that there's a
Yeah.
situation that's gonna. So I don't get it.
Yeah.
I
I
don't get it.
tend to have the gliding path of your average size rock. I'm with you there. So the, I don't know of anybody who watched Superman and thought they could fly too.
I'm sure that there's a point something percent of people out there that would, they just can't quite get it and they would do it. Out of a population of 100% of whatever,
Yeah, you're going to find some outliers at both ends. You know.
there's going to be people that believe whatever they're, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And Jim just provided me with the information. William Moulton Marston. That's his name. He's the guy that uh, developed Wonder Woman. Also went by the pen name of Charles Moulton. Yes, that was him. Uh,
Damn, he was born in 1890 something.
he was an American psychologist who, with his wife Elizabeth Holloway, invented an early prototype of the polygraph. Yeah, yeah. So, Greg is asking, I wonder if the cone of silence inspired a counter espionage device. Um, you know the reference to the cone of silence
Mm-mm. No,
from Get Smart. I don't know if you ever watched that show. It was Don
I
Adams
did.
play.
I
You
did.
did watch it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they'd get into the office there, and him and the chief would have to, they'd want to talk about something that was super, super secret. So they'd sit down in these chairs, and the cone of silence would come down over them.
I remember
And
now.
they ended up not being able to hear one another in the
Right.
cone. So they'd stick their heads out and yell at each other,
Yeah.
you know. Um, no, but the cone of silence was the whole concept of that was did come from real technology. It was radio technology meant to scramble signals so that a bug placed in a room, a microphone placed in a room was basically rendered useless It was electronic signals that wasn't heard by you or me, but was picked up by the microphone that just made any conversation unintelligible.
Mm.
So, um, Linda says, no, it was developed to give dogs a fear of the vet. No, that's the cone of shame, not the cone of silence.
Um, there's a show that's similar to the Twilight Zone
Mhm.
on Netflix that's called Black Mirror.
Okay.
Have you seen any of the
No,
episodes?
I don't have Netflix, so no, I don't.
Black Mirror is an equivalent, roughly, where it tells one episodic story with a unique twist or this or that.
Mhm.
And there's one story, I'll just mention this one story, where it begins. There's a guy working at a tech office
Mhm.
where they develop games, and he's got his office and his partner, and he's the guy that works really hard, and the partner only does the business end.
Mhm.
And a lady comes to work there, and the lady is a big fan of the work that this sort of nerdy guy does, the guy that's in his office that does all the coding and whatnot.
Mhm.
And so the guy actually has a version of the program or game that he's playing or that he's inventing or working on, that's up on the web. He's got a version at home that's in house. He steals the DNA of people that he dislikes,
Mhm.
takes it to this machine, and he recreates out of the DNA a version of these people, sticks it in his world in the game,
Mhm.
in house in his, and tortures the crap out of them. It's a very, but it's not macabre in the sense of gore. It's
Mhm.
more science fiction in the sense of the game is a version of Star Trek, and
Okay.
all the people in the office are cloned in there. The people in there figured out that they're clones of real people out there. They have the same emotions. It's like if right now you discover you're a clone of a real Mark Lindsay. You
Yeah.
have everything Mark Lindsay has, the thinking, the memories, everything, except that you're not the real Mark Lindsay. You're in a simulation.
Yeah.
And this lady is cloned, put in the game, and she's finding out everything that he did. So he'll take someone's lollipop or paper, and he'll use a little machine to extract the DNA, and then he puts them into the machine, and now he tortures them because he's pissed at them. He's like one of these sour pusses. Um,
Okay. So he's taking out his day on the people who caused that day to be bad.
exactly.
Okay.
And the copies of those people figure it out and plot against him, and they go through extremes in order to reach out to the real world. It's a whole thing. Anyways, it's science fiction, but stuff like that that's really cool. Um, just in today's world.
I've never seen that. I've never heard of this series. Like I said, I don't have Netflix, but that premise sounds familiar. I'm going to have to look into that, but that premise sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of themes that could attach to other things.
Yeah.
Um, it has elements of being stuck in a fake world, so it has elements of things like the Truman Show,
Hmm.
although it's not the same thing. But it does have similar. I wonder.
Yeah. 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 And it's weird because then again, maybe I've never heard of it. Maybe I've never heard of that premise. Maybe it's something that I thought of or somebody else was telling me about that they thought of. Like, for instance, I've had this thing in the back of my brain for a long time about what if all of a sudden a day was 25 hours instead of 24. And then all of a sudden I'm watching some TV show where this guy is talking about he had an idea for a book and he was just kind of fleshing it out about um, a comet came dangerously close to the Earth, and as a result, it slowed down the rotation of the Earth just enough to where now there's 25 hours in a day instead of 24. So we have to rearrange our entire calendar and everything else. And then suddenly banks got a hold of it, and companies got a hold of it, and governments got a hold of it. And it just screwed with everybody's life completely, all because of 1 extra hour per day. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, I had this idea too. I had this thing in my back of my brain. Then, as he's telling this story to his publisher says, I got bad news for you. We're working with another author. His book on that exact same premise will be released next month. So he's like, oh, well, hell. The problem was he never said the title of that book or the author's name. So there's a book out there about this that I'd like to read, and I don't know anything about it.
Oh wow.
About 1 extra hour per day. And it's one of those weird things that was just in the back of my brain, and I'm like, what would happen?
China has the same uh, time from one coast to the other,
Mm-hmm.
um, that screws up people
Mm-hmm.
out in the extremes because their neighbors that they trade with or whatever.
Yeah. And the sun's coming up at 9 o'clock at night. Huh?
Yeah, they just kept it unified,
Mm-hmm.
and they said nope, it's all one freaking time zone.
And yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I mean, the reason we came up with time zone was for the railroad, just to keep all the times in sync,
it should
basically.
be 10 o'clock at if we used the China method and we start with home base, which is the
Mm-hmm.
East Coast. If you think about it, right now for you, it's
Mm-hmm.
10:27.
Yeah. Well, no, it's not. But that was something just apropos of absolutely nothing else. That was something that we kept having to inform people about when we lived in Hawaii, because if Hawaii is 2 hours behind us, so it's 5 hours behind you. So it's 10 o'clock at night, 10:30 at night where you're at. It's 5:30 in the evening. They're just sitting down to dinner. Well, the problem with that is if you're a business on the East Coast and it's 8:30 in the morning and you call somebody in Hawaii, it's 3:30 in the morning their time.
Right,
So getting these phone calls in the middle of the night to
is
us
normal.
to tell them, dude, we're 5 hours behind you. Call me back in 5 hours. Click. You know, it just so the subject of time zones just kind of disappear for some people. It happens.
I call my cousins in Spain,
Hmm.
and it's probably like it's very. I mean, the, we will coordinate so that it matches up, but
Yeah.
sometimes I forget and
Oh,
I'm like
okay.
jumping around and it's daytime but it's no, they're freaking calling it a night.
I stand corrected. We're on daylight savings time. They don't have daylight savings time. So you're 6 hours ahead. So
From
it'd be
Spain.
it'd be from Hawaii. So it's 4:30 in the afternoon, not 5:30.
Yeah,
So I forgot all about. Yeah, they don't have daylight savings time. So they just don't need it. They're below the Tropic of Cancer.
it's
So
freaking.
the amount of daylight is pretty constant. Um, so Greg says Newfoundland is only a half hour ahead of the neighboring time. So they're on like a half time zone, like India is. Okay. That's odd. That's real odd. Man.
So I, I do want to mention a side note. It's a little bit there's news around the world,
Of course.
and there's been some craziness going on, and I just want to say that the the news of the attack
Hmm.
really shook my because of the content of or the type of people involved, um, being civilians and children and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Just just shocking. Um, and I've had friends that are likewise shocked, um, and been very vocal and whatnot, and this and that. But it's unfathomable, you know. It's impossible for a human being to even be able to quantify, or make sense of something so savage.
Yeah. I will agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, it's impossible for us here to even consider something like that. Because I don't know, you have to stop and think about the sensibility here. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. I don't care what your opinions are, what your ideology is. I think for the most part, we all just want to be left alone. You know, I'll go out on a limb and say that that's the overwhelming majority of people is they just want to be left alone. They want to do what they want to do, be that good, bad, or indifferent. They just want to get along with life, get on with life. And I mean, you know, what can you say to that? I mean, I I don't know how anybody can justify it
No, I mean,
on either side.
oh, of course.
Hmm.
Um, the thing is that we so we're not. Mm, it's not normal for one to be in constant fear of things like that, or for there to be a. I think it's not normal for there to be a reminder that, oh, 5 years ago this happened, but then 10 years ago, and there be a constant, like, we live in a situation that's way different, even though we have
Hmm.
episodic, localized situations that are not,
Right.
but the idea of civilians, the idea of women and children, the idea of regular people, being used or being hunted down, like all these things, um, on any,
Through no fault of their own, just for existing.
right, or even fault of their own in terms of, so what I mean is that you could be a downright scumbag walking in Main Street somewhere, and by scumbag I mean any number of unpleasant things as a human being. Maybe you tell people to go f off it still does not, shy of you initiating a damage upon another, everything else, or fraud or this or that, everything else, just because I'm displeased with a particular, person's outlook on, or any number of things, the fact that they're just a civilian.
Well,
I don't know if I'm making my point is that
well,
if one does not harm another, everything else, I may not like you or this or that, but a human being does not. It doesn't seem like a normal situation that, or a natural situation that a human being would assault another human being. I know it's more complicated than that, but at its basic
mhm.
foundation level, anything that I do to another person, If I don't want something done to myself, I avoid doing that to other people.
Well, that's because you and I were raised differently. We don't have an all consuming hatred. See, you said you don't find that reasonable. That reasonable people wouldn't think a certain way. That's not normal. I don't think that all consuming hatred of anybody, any any certain class of people, type of people, ideology, religion, I don't think any all encompassing hatred of anybody is normal.
I dislike ideology, certain ideologies.
Right. You can have an opinion, but I'm talking about an all encompassing hatred and wanting to eliminate,
Right.
wipe them off the face of the earth.
That takes it to a level that so I can find plenty of people to disagree with
Hmm.
under the categories of anything from politics to religion to what burger joint to eat at
Yeah,
and
I
so
was
on.
gonna say which burger to get at the Burger King.
So we do have plenty that we can feel, disagreement with others or disdain. But that's one thing.
Mhm.
And then initiating some sort of whoop ass on someone due
Yeah.
to, see, if you would not want something done to yourself, then you would not initiate that on others. That basic premise. But this scenario that's going on over there in the Near East is, it's just a nightmare. It's the amount of suffering on both, ends. Even though there was an initiating party, um, but the innocence, it's just so, it's dirty stuff.
Hmm.
It's inconceivable. I just wanted to mention it. I don't know that it solves anything one way or the other, but to
Well,
not acknowledge that there's something going on to that level, I felt, why not just mention it.
we're for the folks out there listening, we're having to tap dance quite a bit. And we've been tap dancing for a few years now around certain subjects because if we get too hot and heavy into them, certain powers that be like to censor. And certain factions within the population like to go crazy on people for some perceived slight. So we walk a fine line here because we have lives outside of this little broadcast right here. And when you take a side, no matter what side that is, if you take a declarative stand on anything, um, waffles versus pancakes, you run the risk of alienating half of the people who could potentially come across you. And neither of us can afford that because it has in the past to other people and can for everybody come down to acts of violence upon them.
Yeah.
We live in a very strange time where it is not all that difficult to look at somebody online and find them, find their address. So we walk a fine line here in wanting to talk about things, wanting to discuss things without taking a stand.
You're so ominous. It sounded so. You just put it into such a serious way that it's like, wow.
Dude, we have a mutual friend who was out in his shop running his table saw, looked up, saw a car pull into his driveway, and some dude he never met before in his life
I got cake.
showed up in his driveway and was like, "Oh man, I watch you on YouTube all the time." It's like, dude, are you out to get shot? Because this is how you get shot. You don't approach a stranger. You think you know me, but you don't just drive up to somebody's house like you've known them forever and think you're going to be welcome. You don't do that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, and it's real easy to feel like you're safe in your own little cocoon. Oh, the anonymity, man. They don't know me.
Just
They
think
don't
of
know nothing.
just think of this, Mark. Since you went all ominous with me, I'll go ominous with you. Just think of this. Somewhere out there, there's a person that follows you
Hmm.
that, oh no, no, let me lay it out for you. Unbeknownst to you, unthinkable to you, that somewhere in their house, in some corner, there's a shrine
Yeah, right.
with your listen to me carefully, with your picture, and and ritualistically they 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 prostrate themselves and they ponder, and they're shelving,
Mhm.
in their living room. They not DVDs or VHS tapes, recording all of your and they put, while eating popcorn, they rewatch all your stuff. Just
Well,
imagine there's someone.
to that person, I say this: I lay a command unto ye, do something nice for your neighbor. Do something nice for your neighbor. You have a neighbor that needs something done that they can't do themselves. Go do something nice for that neighbor.
And you have no idea.
I think we just met that person.
I gen what?
Genuflect before the mustache sticker.
But you
She means these.
but you have no idea. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the funny weird thing. Obviously, from our vantage point, and like what I just said, it's not like it's an impossibility. There are people that could get obsessed in a certain way. I mean, there's a bunch of things. But here's the thing. On the other, in a different way, you're sitting here now as Mark Lindsay,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't conceive. You can conceive of it, but I'm what I'm going to lay out that, considering all your work that you put out there, to you it's just you, and you're functioning in the world from your vantage point. You're
Yeah.
smoking your cigarette, you're talking, you got your headphones on, you're there in your home, blah blah blah. But you don't know the ripple effect that in 100 years from now, this is just another angle, or 200 years from now, for whatever set of reasons and circumstances that align themselves, the things that you've set up to do in a natural way because it's your natural progression, there could be a hole in the future, who knows, industry, because of
Yeah.
something you said, or something you, or a few choice items that you created, or any set of circumstance, and now you have a whole books written. um I- and why do I say this? Well, I say this because we don't know the future, obviously,
No, we don't.
but the reason I say this is that we're filmed so much and we're
Hmm.
so public, and we don't know. It's like 100 years, 200 years ago, there's films that come out of people, and you see that guy, that one guy, he goes investigates who they were, and this and
Yeah.
that. So we're in a world where it's not like people take on, for whatever reasons, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, for whatever,
Yeah.
maybe due to because you're in the CNC world, and then it becomes a thing that's classic in the early days of, and then you see what I'm saying? Like you
Yeah.
don't. So just an added aside, just an
No,
added aside.
and the only reason I'm not laughing about it, and the only reason I'm not disagreeing with you too much on it, is because we're all basically in uncharted territory right now. As people who come on YouTube and do this stuff live, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen next week, let alone 100 years from now. We don't know where this is going to go. We don't know where this archive of our opinions, our ideas, our thoughts, are reminiscing about our childhoods and the toys we played with and the food we ate and the vacations we went on. We don't know what effect that's going to have on somebody else down the road. It's kind of like you talking about this YouTube channel, Vampire Robot. All of these people in these videos had no clue that some guy in 2023, I don't know how long he's got 408. I don't know how long he's been posting to this channel.
Would be doing what he's doing.
But they had no idea that anybody would be collecting up all of this B-roll or all of these home movies or these snippets from newscasts and putting them somewhere where 7 billion people could potentially watch them.
And hundreds of thousands have.
And why would you? Why would you think that you just going down to the mall to go hang out with your friends at the food court would end up being in the background of somebody else's video that was going to be online 30 years in the future?
Well, look, just today when my internet was out, I started looking through my archives and started reading some PDFs of newspaper clippings
Mm-hmm.
and was reading about Sweetwater and went in depth. And when I came back online, like I told you earlier, um, I said, let me write about this. I mean, it's like a short little
Mm-hmm.
a thing, which I've gotten really into doing. I find a creative outlet. It's a remembrance and stuff. Well, the article from back in 1924 was talking about people in Sweetwater, 15 families that had arrived here from Pittsburgh and set up shop. And this place was basically the middle of the Everglades. Okay. And the article goes into depth on the story. Now, I compiled it and took from a 1979 one too, in order at the end, in order to quickly read. But anyways, the point is that there's names that were named in that article, and I republished, my rewording of it and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
compact. Um, they would never have known or even considered, hey, in 100 and some odd years from now, or in 100 years from now, because it's about 100 years, in 101 years from now, because it was
Mm-hmm.
1924, I think it was, or
Okay,
23,
so that would be 99 years, but yeah. Anyway, right around 100 years.
right around 100 years, in 100 years from now, and that's not a short time. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, think of 100 years. 100 years is a lifetime and some, and then some. Would a guy back in 1924 be thinking, hey, 100 years from now? Sure as heck, our little stint out here in the Everglades is gonna people are gonna know about this. That article is gonna be pulled up. That this and that. I mean, you know, it's and even worse. Even worse. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go there. I'm gonna go there because obviously, that's one scenario. But just imagine. I know this is. I'm gonna go there. Like I know maybe because I always go there because this is what I'm interested in. One of our direct parents, due to the fact that there's Y DNA, that person back in the Bronze Age, that would have been the one that led to you
Mm-hmm.
directly. Scientifically,
Mm-hmm.
it is what it that they would even consider. I mean, they're hunting and trying to survive, maybe, but that they would even consider the concept of 2,000 years, 3,000 years in the future, that a Mark Lindsay, or in my case Eloy, there would be a something that could track them so that his descendant thousands of years in the future would even, if not by name, at least by the blood that's inside of him. Could they even have? So now imagine putting us 3,000 years in the future with all
Yeah,
the things that we have now. We
yeah,
can't
we
even conceive of it.
well, you don't even have to go that far back. I mean, Neil deGrasse Tyson was doing an interview, and for the record, and I Not much for Neil deGrasse
Oh, I'm
Tyson's
not at all either.
personality, but he makes some good points. It doesn't mean that he's wrong. He says when you get back into the 1800s, you had the advent of the steam engine. You had the telegraph. You had the horse and carriage. You had tram lines. You had the beginnings of the subway systems in New York. And there was an article published in, I don't remember what paper he was talking about, in one newspaper, but he says the guy who wrote the article said, with all of the advancements we have made in the 19th century, it's hard to imagine any technological advancements that could ever happen in the 20th century that would be on such a scale. And he said, now think about it. 5 short years later, the Wright brothers flew. And it wasn't very many after that that air travel was getting commonplace.
Yeah.
So, how wrong was this guy? But that's because he wasn't thinking beyond steam. He
It,
wasn't even thinking about internal combustion engines in cars.
and he couldn't have.
And no, he couldn't have because he was within his sphere of technology. We're getting a little bit scared of AI. Some people are getting extremely scared of AI. We have no idea what the technology is going to be like in 2025, let alone what it's going to be like in 3025 or
Yeah.
2123, even 100
We
years
don't.
from now. We don't know.
Yeah, we don't have the, even as we sit, even though we have imagination, but the imagination we have, we're basically in. So you and I and all of us to a great degree, and when I mean great degree, I mean great degree, are informed by the times
Mhm,
that we live in. So our reference points, if we think of horror as an example, our brain goes back to, it could go back to black and white movies, it could go back whatever, but the reference points was put in us
mhm.
as we grew.
Yeah.
So if a brand new funicular machine hasn't been invented yet, it we cannot, if it is invented, easy peasy, because oh okay, this is what it is, but without the advantage of it being in front of us and being in the future, it's impossible for anybody to be able to um, say anything of it. So, yes, indeed, who knows in the future what in the heck?
But that's why it takes guys and women, takes people, it takes these dreamers to come up with these things. It takes folks to, and they don't, they may actively pursue it, they may not actively pursue it. They may just come up with the idea that sparks something in somebody else's brain to go, wait a minute, what if we did this? What if we turned this direction and went that way with it? What if I, added this to that? I mean, think about it. We had um Steve Jobs said, I want a machine. I want a little thing I can put in my hand because I'm tired of trying to run with a cassette tape or a DVD player that's going to skip and bounce and everything. I want to put all of my music on something about this size and be able to play it through a headset, and came up with the iPod.
It was a
All
great
right.
invention.
Now, I don't think he was back there soldering on wires and programming chips. I think he came up with the idea and sat down with the team and they built it together. Came in and figured out the limitations of the technology and pushed the limits and this, that, and the other. But somebody had to come up with the idea. Then said, wait a minute, let's combine that with the telephone and put a camera on it. And then there's the birth of the iPhone.
Yeah.
you know, which then made his previous iPod obsolete
Not really.
because now you have the convenience of a telephone. Everybody who heard him say, let's put a camera on it, thought he was absolutely nuts. Who the hell wants a camera on a phone? Now you wouldn't dream of buying a phone that didn't have a camera on it.
Our reference point is now based on the inventions that we have.
Exactly.
But if you were to take, if you were okay, so let me ask you this. I think I know the answer to this. If I had to bet, I would choose what I think, but um, that doesn't mean that it's true. But I'm just saying I think that this is darn frickin' solid. What do you think about, or at least my conclusion about it? But I'll ask you: if you packed up 100 computers with data built in, all the dictionaries and whatnots, and you went on a time portal back 200 years ago, 1700s. My question to you, and you went to a village somewhere, you set the computers up, and you brought in the people, adults and kids and whatnot. You spent time with them, teaching them that. Do you think it would be impossible for those people living in that era to maybe not catch up because like we've lived it current times, but do you think that they'll get it?
No, because there was no electricity. There was no place to plug in the computer.
No, no, no.
Taking all that aside, I get what you mean. You go
Yeah,
back with a laptop with a
yeah. Because
battery and it
plus,
adds
there's
up.
no time machine.
I think they have. Yeah, I think they would have the mental capacity to figure it out. They would have the mental capacity to learn it.
It will be a mind blowing experience.
Yes, it would, but also you have to think about the limitations of those people and the limitations of us. Would we be able to teach it? It wouldn't be a simple matter of here, sit down and do this. It would be a matter of making it interesting enough for them to actually do it. Now, the novelty would blow their minds, obviously. Sit down with somebody even from the 1920s with a laptop. I mean, I taught a 66-year-old man who had never used a computer in his life. I taught him how to use a computer, and his mind was blown. I mean, every 10 seconds.
The answer,
And this was in 2010. So I get what you're saying. I think they have the mental capacity to deal with it. It's just
let me rework it.
okay.
I would say 100% yes.
Mhm.
Out of 100 people, like everything else,
Mhm.
whatever the percentage is, it's just going to be too much.
Yeah,
And but to a great degree, whatever the case is, they have the capacity to do it back then, now,
sure.
because the human brain has been. It's not like they were not developed; they're fully
No, yeah,
here. But,
no.
but let me get to the thing. Switch that out because a computer is quite involved, and so there's a lot of baggage that we have to sift through in order to give a thumbs up to them being able to like process all that, which I think that they would. But simplify it. Take a Model T
Mhm.
and put it in medieval England. I have zero doubt, zero, that within a year, within a year, the knights and the king, everybody would be going, man, man, man. Why?
I don't think so.
Because oh, I think that that's okay. So I'll see what you think, but let me just wrap
Okay.
this up. I think that's a terrible judgment call in my opinion. What that you said that you don't think so, but we'll see if we'll see what you say. I'll just say this: I know I said it right, but I say I have no doubt that they and obviously this is a big question mark because you can't time travel and this and that, but
Mhm.
um I don't see any, we'll figure it out now. Any answer you could give that would that would make me think that, well, okay, maybe not. It's such a simple thing. You get on it like a horse. It powers. They may not like the idea because it's too shocking. They might think, well, I don't want to get on that darn thing because it. But all that aside, the functionality of what it is, which is a thing that you get on that takes you down the road, you can think of a horse. There's no horse. Where's the fine? But I think that they would overcome that because if it works, it works. But you tell me what you think.
Okay, you said medieval times, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There are too many things that have not been invented. They might like your gadget, but they could never recreate it because there are too many things that have never been discovered or invented.
No, not recreate. I'm saying just they
Oh
all
yeah,
of
they would. Oh yeah, their minds would be blown by it.
I'm just saying all of a sudden this item exists.
Hmm.
It's out of time, out of technology for them, but
Hmm.
now it exists. Mankind, once it's known, simply consumes it.
Oh yeah,
Import and import.
I agree with that, but they would never be able to recreate it because there were too many things that hadn't been invented yet. So, just gasoline, where you would have to go with a full tank and be able to demonstrate it. But once that's out of gasoline, it's out of
No,
gasoline because
but
there
look,
is no more.
the
But yeah, but
the
yes, it they would see the usefulness of it,
the
and they
logistics of that, of getting the gasoline, and none of it is real, even to the point of even bringing it back because we can't go back in time. But
right
the point of the question to
the
you is that would a human being, once you've introduced knowledge, I don't see. Okay, you know how those what are they, the goats that fall? I could see some people dropping because it's so shocking. But
well,
in
yeah.
general, I see human beings once that dropping has that little, they exercise that a little bit. Human beings, all our lives, all we see. Obviously, this is an exaggeration because, but we incorporate the technology like that. We
Hmm.
grab it and then we find uses for it. So I wouldn't see if you took something that's useful or beneficial,
Hmm.
or even not, if it's meant for humans will just incorporate it regardless of. Now if you go back to, we're pounding
Well,
on
yeah, and
rocks.
it also depends on
We're
the
pounding on rock and going,
it depends on
why?
the society and it depends on the region, and there are all kinds of things to take into consideration.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But
Hi, I'm Mark Lindsay. I'm here from the future. I
well,
don't see.
dude, have you ever seen it was a South African movie. It's called The Gods Must Be Crazy.
Is that the one you've told me about it before? I've never sat
It's
through it.
one of the whole thing revolves around this little tribal guy who an airplane's flying overhead, and the tribe thinks these are the gods, flying through the air, and some dude in an airplane finishes a coke
Oh, I
and
remember.
throws it out the window,
Yeah,
and this coke bottle falls down into their village, and it just totally blew their mind that there was this thing you could see through like water, but it was hard. And they found a whole bunch of different uses for it, but all of a sudden it became a problem. This thing that they got along for eons without, everybody had to have it. And it
right.
introduced jealousy and possessiveness. And then
Yeah,
eventually one lady hit another lady with it. So the whole premise of it is he is going to take this bottle back to the end of the earth and throw it off the end of the earth and get rid of it. Okay. And uh, it's the people he meets along the way and a various subplots. I mean, there's a revolution, a military revolution, and I mean, all kinds of stuff goes on. And there's a love story involved that's kind of funny. It's actually a very good movie. But the whole point of something from the modern world mixing in with a world that is, for all intents and purposes, still in the Stone Age.
right.
What do they do with it when they get it?
Right.
They don't know that there are billions of these things worldwide,
To them,
and
it's
we don't even think about it. But I mean, they're using it for everything from mashing this root that they're preparing for dinner to another girl is got the make sure the lid is on, got the mouth of it, and she's putting it in a little bit of ash and she's decorating a piece of cloth with it. And another guy's using it as a hammer and
yeah,
all this other good stuff. I mean, it's actually a very good movie.
yeah. I mean,
But yes, taking a piece of and then we get back to your computer question. It
well,
made
that
me
was a good example that you just used.
well, it made me think of something else. Your computer question, taking all the dictionaries and all of the knowledge. I think that something both of you and I were forgetting is we're coming at this with a 20th/21st century mindset where
Hmm.
we're willing to accept a good portion of what we're being told, be it online or in a book or something like that. We're more willing to accept that because we have seen evidence that it is true. So if we were to suddenly show up in the mid 1850s before the invention of the microscope and start talking about bacteria and things like that, we'd be seen as loonies because you and I couldn't prove it.
Yeah,
But if there were certain things that we could prove, we could demonstrate right there and now. This is why this happens because of X, Y, and Z, and we can show that, then I think that would be a little bit different, you
yeah.
know?
There's big gaps in terms of once there's electricity and prior to electricity, where things started to get invented. But if you think of people, um, everything that's been invented. So okay, so we have the light bulb, and we have things like telephones, and then there's TV, there's radio, there's TV, and things keep progressing, and then there's the hot air balloons, and eventually the airplanes. Oh wow, you could keep it up, in the sky with an
Mhm,
engine, and all this started to until we get to where we are. So we've seen a progression, and we have the background as things happen. But I'm not talking about them being incredulous or being. I'm talking about them um, back then, beyond the shock of something like that. Them being able to that they have the capacity, not in terms of experience, but that their mind. If you leave, I mean, it could be something simpler, like I made an example, but let's say a rifle.
mhm,
It doesn't take um I mean, we don't know all that would be involved, but if you give a rifle, I mean, heck, they gave a rifle to a monkey in a video. They thought it was funny somewhere in some jungle, and the monkey started shooting. All the soldiers had to hide because the monkey didn't know. He was just playing, and he probably felt the kickback
mhm,
and was enjoying that. But we're human, and you give you give a hundred rifles to people back in the day, and they see what it's capable of, and they have enemies across the
mhm.
thing. Chances are that they're gonna. I would bet that they would say, "Hey, King, yeah, what do you think? These things shoot these projectiles, and I know that are slings and whatnot, and arrows, but I could see them going for broke."
Yes, to a certain degree, especially if that technology already existed in some form or another. Like if you took a modern rifle back to the 1750s,
They would know.
they had muskets,
Yeah,
and just showing them the cartridge that we use now, it's all
they would
one
get it.
piece. They would get it, they would understand. We would call it a rifle because the barrels are rifled. They have grooves in a not a
Spiral.
spiral, but a helix
Hmm.
running down the barrel to cause that round to spin for more accuracy. That you could demonstrate, that you can prove and you could show, and they would be like, oh, that would be completely doable. If you introduce the concept of a lightsaber, you have no way of proving that that is, even possible.
Right.
They would have no frame of reference to be able to even think about what you mean, because the electric light hadn't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
So,
But but you, even so, but you could they could have imaginations. I mean, witches didn't
oh, no
exist. I mean,
doubt.
but this technological thing. So a computer would be the ultimate mind blowing thing for people back then.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Notwithstanding the fact that they need electricity to run it and all the stuff, if it popped up in that time
Hmm.
and you had 100 children, I don't see why not. That instead of like the typewriter, well, hell, the typewriter was invented way later, but this keyboard, um, basically instead of the printing press, you have the printing press. I mean, there's ways around it where people get get what something is due to its function, its outcome, or
Hmm.
its output, result. I don't see how they wouldn't be. I'm not saying that they're going to sit there now and be able to cruise through YouTube, but I'm saying that they
Understood.
could.
Understood. They'd be mentally capable, yes, but
Yeah.
it's, I don't know. You would have to kind of be mindful of the fact that some of the things you were telling them or some of the things that you were teaching them may go against everything they think they knew.
No, it would go against everything.
I mean,
They would go, well, number one, they'd be asking, where'd you come from?
well, yeah,
So,
exactly. And
but
what the
I'm
hell
not.
is what is this cloth you're wearing?
Yeah, but I'm not suggesting any of that. I'm just saying that everything being equal, if you introduce, well, it's kind. You know what it is, kind of. I guess I'm in Star Trek. They have this thing where when they go visit a planet,
Hmm.
not to get involved
Right,
because anything can affect um, the development of the
right,
people in that planet.
right.
So they know that if you introduce some, or at least in the show, if you introduce something like some knowledge or whatnot, all of a sudden you have this group of people at this stage of the game in
Right.
time with this knowledge, and what would be the consequences of something like that. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Even something simple and stupid as a guy bangs two rocks together and you show him, no, bang it together with the rhythm. Bang, 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 bang. You've just introduced music. Now, maybe they had a concept of music, but you've just introduced rhythm.
yeah,
Where
they
is that
might
going
not
to
get it,
go?
but
They may not get it, but they'll like it or they won't. They may go forward with it, they may not.
yeah, I
But
mean,
you've introduced a new concept that they hadn't come up with themselves.
yeah, I think.
Um,
Go ahead.
you kind of danced around one point,
Yeah,
um, probably very unintentionally, but you were talking about um, tracking ancestry. They would have no concept of you being able to track back to that person based
mhm.
on blood and what have you.
That they
There are,
wouldn't.
yeah, you were talking about they wouldn't have any, there'd be no idea that would they be able to imagine that we today would be able to trace our ancestry back
Right,
based on the
right,
blood?
right.
But they did. There are some paleontologists, or not paleontologists, anthropologists who they theorize that some of these primitive humans did have a concept of the future and wanting to leave their mark on the future. Now, others say no. And what I'm talking about is these silhouettes of handprints that are on some cave walls that they've
Mhm.
dated back thousands of years.
Yeah.
Some believe that this is just artwork, this is creativity. I have no argument with that theory. But others believe that this is basically a record. And if you look, you'll see layer upon layer. They're speculating that this may be generations leaving their mark that we were here.
Those people that did the handprints and stuff, at least in Europe,
Hmm.
which is found in France and northern Spain,
Yeah,
is part of the Magdalenian culture,
right.
um, which were hunter gatherer people. They were the first of three groups of people that later became what modern Europeans are today. And one of the suggestions is that you said that, well, number one, the idea that you leave a mark,
Hmm.
um, you could go either way. It could be just passing the time, but the suggestion is that they did that and that for thousands of years, generations after generations, from across that culture at that time, which happened to be, although currently, you and I and everybody out there, everybody out there, all of us, um, share these as ancestors. It's a very small smidgen of a percent in the
Yeah,
overall mixture, because other people came
yeah,
and surpassed, but they wouldn't know, because my point about the DNA and then the parent to parent wasn't that they couldn't think that there's a future and that they would, you know, that they
right.
could leave. My point was that they would
Oh,
not even be able to imagine the specific of of people in 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, and more, being able to reach back from the future
right.
through that system. So that's
And
more of what I was saying.
yeah,
Not that.
I understand. I wasn't making that comparison at all. I just wanted to get your idea on what you thought of that theory that that's what these handprints were.
I think
That,
so.
you
I think
know,
so.
if there's mom and dad put up their handprints and then the three kids. And then one of the kids grows up and has mom and got a couple of kids and they do it too. And then one of those kids grows up and takes mom and their kids and they do it too. And pretty soon you've got this patchwork of all these different handprints. Soon some are going to get forgotten, but it becomes kind of this is going to sound Pollyanna. This is going to sound old fashioned as hell. Do you remember when your dad put the star on the Christmas tree up on the top?
Yeah.
That was kind of special. That the final decoration, that star went up on top. Do you remember the first time you did it?
Not necessarily.
In my family, it kind of became the passing of the torch,
Okay.
kind of a thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can see
yeah,
that.
you're the adult. You put the star up on top of the Christmas tree now. Maybe dad can't do it. Maybe he's too old to get up, climb up there, or what have you. Or maybe it's just your house, your wife, your kids. You're putting your star on your Christmas tree. I mean, maybe it's something similar to that. I don't
Yeah,
know.
but they've studied that, and there are the two theories that you
Mhm.
mentioned. One of them, well, the theory is that they would come back for thousands of years.
Mhm.
So it was an intergenerational, across generations of
Mhm.
people from a culture coming to the sites in
Mhm.
order to, what they assume was, so these people did, and these were full humans, by the way.
Mhm.
The people that left those marks, categorically, they were full human beings.
Oh
There,
yeah,
there was no ooga ooga, none of that. These were human beings. It's just that they were human beings that were a specific group at a
that
specific time.
yeah, thousands of
Um,
years. Yeah.
And so the suggestion that they went there with this thinking of the future, and their, their time on Earth and all these
Yep.
things that you're suggesting is strongly suggested that this is what it was.
Now, what I like best about the two different theories is that the proponents of each of those theories, none of them that I have heard anyway discounts the other. And in fact, acknowledge that, yeah, these people may be right. It may have started out just as art, but then maybe it turned into something else. There, there are cases that they have found and discovered where things started out as one thing and became ritualistic or just traditional. And now that's just what we do. Think about carving a jack o' lantern for Halloween. You might be able to trace back when it started,
It
but
developed.
now it just developed and we all do it.
It turned into its cultural,
Yeah.
a part of the cultural thing, and people don't know why they do it, but they do
Hmm.
do it.
And we
Yeah.
decorate our houses for various holidays. That has become a tradition and almost ritualistic in and of itself. And many times we don't even know why we do it. We just know that, okay, it's October. Now's when we put up the cutouts of ghosts, and maybe we have fake tombstones we put out in the front yard. And oh, we got the funny little thing that you put on the tree that looks like the witch flew into the tree, that kind of thing. We don't really know why we do it. We just do it. I'm not saying it's not fun. I'm not saying that it's not neat. I'm not saying that it's not an absolute blast to drive around and just look at Christmas lights. I still like to do that. But a lot of times we do these things and we don't even know why we're doing it. Is it just for the art of it? Or is it just because we think we have to? Or is it just become one of those traditions that we do without understanding why we do it?
It's all of those things.
Yeah, no.
It's all those things that you just said, because there's a little bit of all of that involved in it,
Hmm.
keeping the tradition alive, force of habit, expectations, or
Hmm.
wanting to conserve moments. I think that, I mean, they had to have had, I mean, number one, life was pretty rough for them, um, apparently, because, I
Hmm.
mean, well, life was pretty rough for them. The weather was different. They had to hunt, and all these things. Whereas, we
Yeah.
generally can go to the grocery store and whatnot, but they had to have in their minds the finite circumstances that they lived in, and if you consider them human like us, which they were, genetically speaking, and even they would have concerns like we have,
Hmm.
longings like we have. They were us, or we they are in us, those people, that group of
Hmm.
people that did the paintings, but to a small degree, and they were human. And I would suggest that I would have to bet on what you said, that they had all those things going on.
Hmm.
They had to have had it, because, I mean,
Well,
unless,
yeah, and working within their known worldview and their level of technology. I mean, Jim
yeah,
Dockrell makes a great point here. What family with a project involving concrete does not put a kid's hand or footprints in the concrete before it dries, or sometimes even the dog? I mean, you were there when your parents built the house that you're in right now. Did you put your hands in the concrete anywhere, or write your name or anything like that?
no, no. I put tiles down as a little kid. He
Mhm.
taught me to put tiles down, and
But when they
but
poured the foundation, you never wrote your name in it, or they didn't have you put your handprint in it or anything like that?
no, no.
There are millions of patios all throughout this country, or even, sidewalks on properties with handprints and names and dates and things like that. So I know exactly what Jim's talking about because I
Oh no, I
didn't.
know what he's talking about, but in my case, no, it wasn't. It's funny because where I'm sitting right now was all. I remember it being all lumber.
Hmm.
I remember it being and me walking through these spaces as a little kid,
Hmm.
and it was an open air shell
Hmm.
with lumber sticking up, forming the
Yeah.
walls. And I imagine watching that as a kid. You
Hmm.
never really seen
Yeah.
a house going up, and now you're seeing a house going up in your backyard. It's like, dude, it's pretty crazy stuff. Now, imagine these people back then. Um, it wasn't them. It wasn't the ones we're talking about now, but the ones that came after that erected things like Stonehenge.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that. There has to be the notion of everything that you're saying. Well, actually, those were the pre-Celtic and Celtic people, and they would have had these longings. I mean, we can actually see that in Celtic culture anyhow today,
Hmm.
but they had to have these things that we have, which is the longings and the
Sure.
ritualistic things. It's just in their own way. So
Sure.
yeah, yeah.
But I think part of it also is that we have a tendency, modern day, to think that these people weren't appreciative of art or things of beauty just for the aesthetic, and I think we've talked about this before, that it was some documentary, I don't remember. I was passing from room to room, and I just walked past the TV and caught about maybe a minute and a half of it. But it seems to me every single artifact, every single cave drawing or painting, every single sign of an existence before recorded history has to have a spiritual meaning to it that we project onto it. And maybe, just maybe, they did it because they thought it looked good. And maybe it was just for the aesthetics.
There's a uh, by the way, when you said passing from room to room, I smiled because I was thinking, I'm sorry, passing and then another word from room to room. Can you fill in the
Well,
blank?
yes, and I was on my way back from doing that, but yeah,
When you said that, I just
yeah, I
because
was coming from the bathroom back into here, and I had to go through the living room to get there. So yeah.
do you remember? For some reason, it just popped into my. I saw it in my mind,
Yeah, I know you did.
and I just cracked up. Um, do you remember that show that we like, Norseman?
Norseman, yeah.
Okay, in Norseman, once they capture the Roman guy,
Hmm.
the actor,
And he convinces them to for the artwork. Yeah,
yeah, and so at one point he
the
says,
art
you know,
installation.
yeah, the art. So he says, the Viking guy says, listen, I want to bring culture to my people. We're backwaters. I don't know. And whatever he says, it's funny the way he says. And he says, well, if you ask me, I think that you need an installation.
Hmm.
And he says, oh, yes, we need an installation. What's an installation?
Yeah.
Right. And so he said, well, the whole process of this installation thing is the fact that there's this iconic thing in a village or that people walk around, live around. It's the equivalent of, although it's a pyramid or some sort of type of structure, hell, even the roads the Romans built. I mean, just a number of things. These things are culture coagulants,
Hmm.
um, because now a conversation is had in the shadow of a sphinx. Now the exchange of money for services rendered happens a few miles or a few in clear sight of a obelisk.
Mhm.
Now you have, and so these things, and plus it shows the power of the thing. And so I think that, yeah, I think that that these items have that purpose,
Oh,
but it can also take on a religious thing.
sure. Monuments to kings no doubt exist. We know that. They no doubt exist. Monuments to deities exist. We know that. But does it stand to reason that because those things exist, everything that exists from their time has to do with the king or spirituality?
Some things, yes.
It's some things, yes, but not everything. If we attach, I guess that's what I'm getting at. If we attach a royal or spiritual connotation to every single object, where do we draw the line? Does the knife and fork also become ritualistic for only for religious feasts? Does the plate that the guy whose job it is to clean out the stables, does that become only a religious object? Where do you draw the line is what I'm getting at. Obviously these people were capable of creating art. Isn't it also possible that they would create art just for art's sake?
I'll give you another example of something that could be an answer in a weird mix of a way. There's a photo. I came up. I ran into a site on Facebook that's old photos, pre-communist Cuba, photos of Cuba,
Mhm.
and I went through and looked at very cool. I mean, there's Hemingway, and just it's incredible. And then I ran into a picture to answer to give you
Mhm.
a thing to see what you say, and it's the brand new opening of a gas station.
Mhm.
It's a black and white photo, and there's a choice crowd around the pumps, and a priest is blessing the business. And so the reason, so so the reason I bring that up is that it could be all of them. You see what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
To your question, so you have this thing that's a functional business thing,
Mhm.
but due to the fact that humans exist with functional things plus spiritual concerns plus
Right.
this priest was blessing the situation.
Right.
Now you have a scenery. Obviously, this is 1950s or 40s, and now you have a snapshot of a picture of
Mhm.
a gasoline station with a priest. So you have the functionality of a service, a business. You have the religious thing in the same thing. Now, was it built for the purpose of religion? It wasn't built for the purpose of religion, but the point is that it could be all the same thing, all wrapped up into it. In other words, a society forming in itself
Mhm.
is evidence that it wants to preserve itself, and the connotations of religion that coincide with that and other concerns, it's all wrapped into one. So it's if you look at something and you don't think it's spiritual from ancient times, it very might well not be, but it's not outlandish to think that the society that in which this item was built, um, the fact that they even became a civilization would have had religious undertones.
Yeah, and I don't discount that at all. I don't discount that. But let's take your snapshot in time, that photograph you're talking about.
Yeah,
Is there anything, and you have limited information about it. You know
yeah,
more about it. You and I know more about it just by virtue of we know what a gas station is.
yeah.
But is there anything in that photo that would leave one to believe that any of those gas pumps had a religious purpose?
No, no.
Probably not,
In
because we
itself,
know
no.
what a gas pump is. Because we know what a gas pump is. But that's not to say somebody 2,000 years from now who digs up some weird way, they get on Facebook and they see that. Oh, look, they're worshiping at this altar. These three gas pumps represent the three kings. who came to witness the birth of their Lord and Savior in some place called Bethlehem. You could make that jump. You and I know that's ridiculous, but it sounds good to them because they have to speculate about our society. What I'm saying is, isn't it possible that we're doing the same thing?
Is it possible? I would say yes, anything is possible, but I would also add to that, give the example specific, and then we could judge on it specific, but broadly speaking, yeah. Is it possible? Yeah, broadly speaking, it's possible. Because of course, but if you said the Greeks, no, the Greeks were spiritual. If you said the Romans, no, the Romans were spiritual. If you said
True.
the Egyptians, they were spiritual. You
Hmm.
could argue, well, no, they just did the gods in Greece because it was artistic, and you'd be right. But there was also spiritual, and they have
Right.
manuscripts that speak of it. But maybe they were speaking in the. Go ahead.
And we have the benefit of having those manuscripts. We also have the
Yeah,
benefit of Herculaneum and the other one that was wiped out by
potassium,
Vesuvius. No, the town that was wiped out by
Palmarians,
um, Pompeii.
Pompeii.
We have Pompeii and Herculaneum, those two towns.
Yeah,
We have those snapshots in time. And we know that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans did have art just for the sake of art. Now, yes, they did have their temples, and yes, they did have their shrines to gods, but they also would paint vines up columns.
yeah, but what?
We
Okay, but
also know
I guess
that
I
they
don't.
would lay down mosaic floors and things just for the aesthetic purpose, just for
Yeah,
art in itself.
yeah, but I don't. I don't. Who
We
who is it?
we
Well, hold on. No, but
also have
hold on.
their graffiti. But go ahead.
But who? But you're. But we know this because the people that do such work say, "No, this is graffiti, this is tile work," and so there's like they separate. But who specific, or who are the people you're saying that think everything is spiritual?
Um, Archaeologists in general, because it was not just this one documentary, it's a bunch of documentaries that I've
That point
seen
to spiritual?
that the minute they find something, there's a spiritual connotation to it. You know, if
Yeah,
they find a cup and it's got the figure of a person, oh, yes, this was dedicated to this god. Well, how do you know? How do you know it was dedicated to this god? Now, if it's a hieroglyph that you can identify and it is dedicated to uh, this particular god, then okay, fine, I'll shut up. But just because it has a face on it doesn't mean that it's about this god. It could be their next door neighbor that they're secretly in love with,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And we know that the ancient Romans and the ancient Greeks did do some things for aesthetics. So where do we draw that line? Where do we cut that off and say, oh no, these people didn't do anything just for the beauty of it, they did it all because of it was a monument to a pharaoh, or it was a monument to this god, or there was some spiritual connotation? How do we know that? Maybe they did it just because it looked good.
Yeah, I mean, uh, broadly speaking, they have things like there's a one with Roman tiles where there's a dog,
Hmm.
and it's just a household pet
Hmm.
from back then,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, but I think that people wouldn't make that argument. Any reasonable person would say, no, that's not spiritual. I don't know. So, in order for me to decipher what in that term, what is spiritual and what's not, I would have to delve into that in terms
Yeah.
of, so that I could
Yeah.
then, because other than that, broadly speaking, yes, is it possible? And there's actual examples that items are have been deemed, no, this is just daily life things. So
Hmm.
yeah, broadly speaking, but if you say specifically, well, the Greeks X, Y, and Z, well, no, the Greeks, they had items that were pointing to the gods and whatnot, this and that. So both things are true, I think, depending
Yeah.
on what Yeah. Now,
I
really old stuff like what you were saying originally with the handprint,
hmm
I would personally say broadly, it is spiritual. Now, I'm not saying it's spiritual exactly in terms of, and this is why they did it, and this is why they had. I'm saying that doing that and having, if it's true that they came for thousands of years, and there's really, uh, like they study this. I haven't studied that other than reading what they've written, but the act of people coming back to a place as sort of like a, there's a word for it,
a
like a hermitage,
tradition. Hmm.
some sort of
Oh, a
hermitage
pilgrimage. A pilgrimage. Yeah.
pilgrimage. That is a spiritual undertaking.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. I would agree with you
Yeah,
there. It's more or less like Muslims and the Hajj. You must
right.
make the pilgrimage once in your life. That's 100% spiritual.
Yeah.
And there are
Although other things are involved, like
right.
they're walking, so they might need their little canteen to drink water out of,
Hmm.
or who knows what, and they may drop it along the way. Now an archaeologist finds
Yeah,
it.
the shoes that they wore that day. Yet we know and they know that some things were utilitarian. But if anything has any sort of, it displays any sort of creativity to it or an art uh, aesthetic to it, there's a lot of speculation towards it. It's got a spiritual connotation. And maybe, just maybe, some things don't.
They
But
were just having
but
a good
we're
time.
projecting onto them.
So, but again, there's no reason why to say no to that, because we're speaking broadly.
Mhm.
But if you were to say, Eloy, we found this, like in Ukraine, this bracelet, and it's got this pattern, and it's from a Scythian group of people on horseback, and they were buried here, and this is not religious, this bracelet,
Mhm.
um and here's why. And like if we got into a specific, then, and by the way, I just put all that
Mhm.
together, like I don't know that even any of that, but as an example, then that would be a specific thing, and maybe according to the evidence of it,
Mhm.
then we could say, yeah, that kind of leans towards it being a religious thing. But
Mhm.
broadly, yeah, I would have. I mean, yeah, there's tons of items that are not, that would not be religious,
Mhm.
or apparently, as far as I've been
Now,
able to, limited understand.
now I could see it from a certain point of view as well. That if you're going to build an obelisk in ancient Egypt, a grand construction here, there's going to be a good reason for it. So it's probably going to be dedicated because we're talking about a huge undertaking with hundreds of people doing it.
Yeah,
So you can imagine it's going to probably either be dedicated to someone of royalty, someone's memory, probably royalty, or it's going to be dedicated to a deity. You can understand that,
yeah.
you know, but not every single stinking thing that has artistic value to it
But I don't know
has
who
to
it.
have that
But I don't know who it is that you're saying that. Like I don't know what group of what
it's
channel.
just a trend that I see in a lot of these archaeological documentaries, you know, and it's just,
But if we sat down, okay, so if you and I sat down and like double down in order to research
mhm,
whatever, so like like got into it that way,
mhm,
we could, chances are, since these people are the expert, it might not be true,
mhm.
and we might, but chances are that what they're saying is roughly within the ballpark. If they're
And they might
speculating,
be.
yeah, if they're speculating, they're speculating. But
Mhm.
there are, I would assume at this point, there's telltale signs when something leans towards, you
You
know,
know, and maybe it's just my problem with the way these things are presented, because they may be discounting completely all the things that they have discovered that have just an aesthetic purpose for it. They may just be focusing on the things that they can show definitively do have a spiritual aspect to it, or a ritualistic aspect to it, or is honoring a king or something like that.
yeah.
Maybe that's all they're presenting. So maybe they're not showing this ornate hand mirror that used a piece of whatever so that this woman could look at her reflection when she's, doing her makeup or what have you.
There's also another angle to this, which is something that we always go to, and you went to today
Mhm.
from our vantage point today in modern times. The definition of what entails spirituality or religion
Mhm.
for us can also be another situation where for them, like our notions of religion and what accounts for
Mhm.
that is based on our modern thing.
Yeah, and not their daily life.
So
Yeah.
who knows if what they deem religious would seem to us not. I mean,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? So there's all
Yeah.
that, but that's a broad.
Yeah, and it's hard to do this without painting anything with a broad brush. It's hard to do it without doing that. Because
Yeah,
let's go back to that hand mirror. Let's say on the back there's carvings of seashells. Does that necessarily mean that that was carved as some sort of a ritualistic nod to Venus rising from the sea?
no.
No, it might just mean she liked seashells. It could just as easily have been a bird or a flower.
Yeah, if somebody makes that argument, and they have nothing to back it up, then they have nothing to back
Yeah.
it up. But so you're just using that example, but I think that we're very. I think we're in agreement that,
Yeah.
I mean, if we're in agreement that there's items that don't have any religious thing
Yeah.
to it.
I mean, and I don't think they attempt to put any kind of a spiritual introduce any kind of a spiritual element to like somebody's sandals. Or now they may put a spiritual element. There may be a spiritual element in the robe that they wore. Maybe certain colors meant certain things, or maybe certain styles of robes were worn for certain rituals, and they can tell based on hieroglyphs. Oh no, they're wearing this robe, and that meant that. He's wearing this crown, that meant war. Now if you've got something to back that up with, then I'm your biggest cheerleader because I want to learn too. But if you're just speculating, maybe some speculation should be left as that, or at least say we're speculating here. We have no way of knowing.
Yeah, but okay. So I think that that's why I keep repeating this broad thing. If you're gonna use you're gonna paint with a broad brush over um, people that are in that field or presenters that go straight for everything is has a spiritual connotation. I think that nobody in specific is arguing that, um, unless you like say, hey, this presenter calls everything spiritual, and so unless you go specific and say, hey, this is this guy, as a broad thing, your statement
Well,
to me holds true or reasonable, because why would everything be have a spiritual
it,
connotation? But
it's just something that I've noticed over time and watching documentaries on archaeology and new discoveries and this, that, and the other over the course of, decades. I mean, ever since I was a kid in school watching the National Geographic on the 16 millimeter projector that would sometimes do that, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. I mean, it's just over time, it seems like no matter what they find, unless it's something benign like a rock hammer or a rock axe, it just seems to me that that's the first jump, that it's easy to make that jump and it's easy to make that connection that, oh yes, this was a ritualistic thing and it was done for this, when it's like, how do you know? And if you know, tell us how you know, because that's part of the learning process as well. If you don't know and you're just speculating, say that.
A lot of these, a lot of these documentaries are meant for popular consumption, and they're not going to get into the science behind the thing. But
Right.
there's there's lectures online over, like, there's one for Göbekli Tepe, I think it's called. It's
Yeah,
the most ancient.
yes, there's a few of them, as a matter of fact.
They go deep into it, but even as deep as they go in, because they're lectures as opposed to like
Mhm.
a documentary. Because a
Right.
documentary,
You're
like,
getting the cliff notes in a documentary. Yeah.
terrible, because like they'll say Rome, and in Rome, Julius Caesar walking into, and they're dramatizing, um and it's helpful to get a picture of a broad, but they're not. The
Yeah,
thing
they
is
don't know
that,
the dialogue. So yeah, they're speculating big time.
yeah, I've downloaded so many PDFs of studies. If you're not into it at the moment, if I'm not in, unless I'm looking for something, it's for, or I'm, for some reason, a little gap, uh, reading those, and they measure the freaking sword that they found,
Hmm.
and then the half of the freaking, they're explaining this, just the sword, and
Hmm.
you're like, oh, I don't want, I want to know one thing, and then they have no, because these little beads were found inside the grave, and you're looking through the thing and stuff, unless you're super, like, you really want to,
Hmm.
there's so many different little,
Yeah.
the public at large doesn't want to hear all that.
No, they don't. You're right. But I mean, just acknowledging the fact that some of this is speculation. I guess I'm saying admit to the public that sometimes you just don't know. You don't have an answer. But
No, but
nobody wants to do that. Nobody in the public eye, especially in a documentary that's presenting for the public, they don't want to admit that they don't know.
we also don't know the behind the scenes information to
Oh,
even say
absolutely.
that they're making something up.
No, I'm not suggesting that they are. I'm just suggesting that if they are, say that. If
Oh,
you're speculating, at least say that.
yeah.
Well, we can only speculate, but based on our knowledge that we have found at other digs, we can we can fairly confidently say that we think this and this and this. I'll accept that and I'll shut up, because you can only go on the evidence at hand, you know.
Yeah.
But to automatically make the leap, oh, this was a sacrificial altar. No, it wasn't. It was a guy's workbench. You know, knock it off, will you?
Yeah. Yeah. If you were to say something specific, like, hey, this tribe that was found here,
Mhm.
and they left these items, and then you broke it down in a specific thing, but broadly speaking, yeah, we have to be suspicious unless we,
Mhm.
or at least a little bit, um I don't know what the word is, mindful.
Mhm.
Are we, I don't believe,
And let's
I
be
don't believe, like,
honest too.
what.
And let's be honest while we're doing it.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like for instance, I read these things, and they have timelines.
Mhm.
I look at the timelines. I don't know that these timelines are true. They're saying due to X, Y, and Z, these timelines are true. So I run with that,
Mhm.
but
Well,
I know that, well, I don't know what I don't know, but
right,
I leave it.
exactly.
I leave it open enough to think maybe they're not right.
Yeah, and it's possible that they aren't right. For instance, and I've been wondering how I was going to bring this in, and I'll do it right now. I said earlier that I had a follow up to something that you and I talked about that I thought was kind of funny. Do you remember? It's been a couple weeks back. I said something about, they can do DNA tests on your dog.
Yes.
There is a TV station back in Boston, CBS news station back in Boston, that was talking about just this subject. And this lady wanted to get her German Shepherd tested because Shepherds have a history of hip issues. So she wanted to get DNA testing to know what the dog's history was. The test came back not only showing German Shepherd, but also 14 other breeds, to include Chihuahua. Okay.
Hmm.
So this news organization, their investigative unit, came in with more tests from a bunch of different companies to compare. All of them came back with German Shepherd, but the percentages of German Shepherd range from 65% to 29%. Okay. To include like Great Pyrenees, Siberian Husky, Korean Jindo, things like that. But here's the biggest surprise: this woman collected a sample from her own cheeks. Then they sent that in. The result came back and said this woman was 28% Bulldog, 40% Border Collie, and 32% Cane Corso. She said, well, some people might agree. She
Is that?
joked.
Oh, it's not true.
No, she said, well, some people might agree that I am, a certain
No, but
amount of
the
dog.
test did come back that way.
The test did come back. It listed her results. Now, this is her human cheeks: 28% Bulldog, 40% Border Collie, 32% Cane Corso.
There's two possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
One, the whole bit is a lie, or it's either that one, a lie, or the company. In other words, the lady's lying to make a good story, or the company didn't test Jack Squat.
Okay.
No, 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 she's lying. Sorry, she's lying. There's only one result because the company, if they are a company, wouldn't, number one, the test wouldn't show the woman. It can't because there's
Okay.
the DNA is not equivalent. One. And
She's not
number,
lying. She's not lying. I'll just put that to bed.
I okay, so I don't know that, but you'll explain now. But let me just give my thought.
Okay.
There's no way. So one, either she's lying, you're saying she's not, but and I guess you'll explain. And number two, there's no way at all that a human's DNA will register with an animal's DNA. It does not happen. So if that's the case, well, no, it can't be. It's got to be that she's lying because I'm trying to work it out so that the company, I'm trying to find fault with the company.
Well, let me finish the story.
Oh,
You
okay, let
can.
me, yeah, no, let me give the second one, then you finish it. The company, it could be that she tested that, sent it off. The company doesn't do jack squat. They just write results, and she found out that they were being fraudulent. So those are the two options. But I would lean towards, and you'll explain. I'll lean towards she was lying because I don't see a company risking it like that. But go ahead.
Okay. The woman, the news team, their investigative reporters were there with her. They have her on video doing the swabs in her cheeks, putting them into the thingies, and then putting them in the envelopes. The news company sent it all in. She didn't pay for any of this. Okay. The company that gave her the results, they said they called that company to find out what the hell. They said they found canine DNA on one of those swabs, only one of the two swabs. The second sample did, in fact, yield canine DNA. The results provided would not be possible with a human sample. They cannot explain, none of them can explain why there would be canine DNA on that one sample. None of them can. Personally, personally, I think Steve has it. I think it's possible that the samples got mixed up somehow because they, as well, and they contacted the other companies that they sent samples to, told them about it, and asked their opinion. All of them agreed that any DNA being examined, they would immediately be able to identify whether there was canine DNA there or not. So, you know,
Well,
but the my whole point for bringing all this up is there is a Dr. Linda Moses, veterinarian and biochemist with Harvard Medical School, says she believes basically the science is fuzzy on all of this because there are no real official definitions for breeds. And there are no exact genetic codes to match them up. There really isn't a gold standard answer for what your dog is. A breed is something that we have decided, which is based essentially on the way a dog looks. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to know what their genes look like.
okay, so with all that, number one, I'll have to sit and think about how the heck I feel like someone's lying, you know, because unless it got contaminated or what Steve said,
Yes.
because or someone fudged the numbers thinking we got to get paid, so we might as well put this one, jot this one down as 50% border collie and whatever.
Yeah,
I can see,
and that's a possibility. We got to earn our keep here.
yeah, I see because it just doesn't add up. But anyways, the lady from Harvard, she's basically saying the same thing that they explain about human DNA. And dogs all come from a small group back in time
Mm-hmm.
that branched out and into different breeds as
Mm-hmm.
we made them different breeds. Um, and humans are the same way. You can't tell um, at a normal as an example, at a normal magnification, as shocking as this might sound out there, and later on it won't eventually because it is what it is. You can't tell the difference between a European person from, I don't know, somewhere in Normandy compared to a person out in the Caucasus or someone down in Africa, from each other. Even though the tests say 50% this, 70%, 25% that, and this and that, even though you see that breakdown, um, what they're doing is what the dogs are doing, dog people are doing. They're looking at the genes and how they line up in segments. And if, um, I don't know, German Shepherds have a certain stretches of segments that have the certain letters, that leans more towards German Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a closer magnification, looking at at the sequence. And if they see it leaning towards German Shepherd more, they say, "Oh, that's then that means these are German Shepherds,"
Mm-hmm.
and they do that with humans too. So there's not like mine says I'm 60 something% or whatever Spain, 14% France. I'm
But
not any of that.
all of that relies on the data sets that they're using. They can only compare that to other samples that they have.
Well, let me say, this is like a key thing in this whole. I'm none of that in terms of like the Spain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for the purposes of this explanation, which is absolutely, it, I stamp it with a rubber stamp 5 times over because it doesn't come from me. It comes from years of reading and watching these lectures from the people that do it, including
Mm-hmm.
Harvard. The explanation is that, let's say 50 something percent Spain,
Mm-hmm.
and then 14% France, and whatever, and this and that. Um, the public at large want to know,
Mm-hmm.
oh, where do we hail from, and this and that. What they have always known, and going back years, is that people bleed into each other
Mm-hmm.
in a continuum, regardless of where they're from. People in England, as an example, if you test two different people, they look different from each other incredibly, and yet at the same time are 99% the same at a broad level. But if they go in, they could see ancestry. In other words, people mating and little letters matching in the ways that they do
Sure.
because that population kept mating with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But those letters can be found in Africa
Yeah.
in that same pattern, or in close enough so that you can't tell the difference. Um, and it's a spider's web of ancestry. So what they do is they look for people to compare it with, and they lean it or nudge it and say, okay, we're
Mm-hmm.
going to say that this is British,
Yeah.
but the this is British that they set, that they fall um, on ancestry, let's say, would be different than the British sample that they decide on over on FTDNA. They're both British people, but they're different people, even though they're in the same. And so you'll have people on one test leaning more towards, I don't know, Irish, and
Mm-hmm.
on another, but they're actually should be more English in the one test, but they're Irish in the other. They're neither of those, and yet they're both of those. So these percentages are basically just saying this is what you are based on our database,
Mm-hmm.
and it's pretty freaking accurate at the same time if you want to think of it in percentages,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really not that way. But for the public at large and for myself, in order for me
Yeah.
to even have gotten to where I'm at now in slightly understanding, I had to understand it in terms of percentages. Because if they tell me, Eloy, you are 100% African, which they you can have a test where
Mm-hmm.
it says who's at, in order to be human, and this is the part that gets, for a lot of people, you, at one magnification we're all African. So you could have a test out there, but nobody's gonna like that. And it says, here's your DNA test. You're 100% African, which means you're 100% Homo sapien. That is the truth of the matter. Um, but people don't want that. What they want to know is, where were my ancestors 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's why they do what they do. So the same with dogs. But the lady and this whole thing that you said doesn't seem, somebody or something went
Yeah.
really
Something is screwed up. And that was the point that they were trying to make, was that don't think of this as 100% reliable, because even the concept of breeds is unreliable. We decide in our mind that this dog is this breed because we think that's how this dog should look. So, yes, it might be a Labrador retriever, but there could be a whole bunch of other things in there. But because it looks like a Labrador retriever, its mother and its father were Labrador retrievers, their mothers and fathers were Labrador retrievers. We decide this is a Labrador retriever.
yeah, it's kind of like that.
Mhm.
And it's not that it's bad. It's
No,
actually,
it just is. It's not good or bad. It just is.
they decide on it because they have to figure we need some sort of base for
Mhm.
Labrador retriever. Um, but Labrador retrievers look similar genetically to other dogs
Mhm.
too much.
Mhm.
I'm assuming because that's the case with humans. I don't see why not with dogs, but I don't know. I haven't looked at dogs. But
Yeah.
with humans, it's the same difference. An African guy, what appears quite African, like for instance, who, who would you say, broadly speaking, or that most people, who would you say is closer to Africa? A person from Wales to the African, or a person from, I don't know, the what do you call those islands out in the Pacific?
The
Like,
Philippines,
yeah, like let's say the Philippines. Who's closer to Africa? Not in distance of like distance, but
geographically, yeah.
not geographically, but instead genetically. Who would you
How
say?
far back are you going to go? Because as you've already stated, we all are.
The sooner the who's sooner back in Africa?
I mean, it depends on the person.
Well, they're both
There are
okay.
too there are too many variables to
So
say that, man.
so 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 the answer is that both of them, the Philippine person and the Wales person, genetically, in terms of if you're measuring for
Mhm.
them, um, they're both equally as far as you can get from African,
Mhm.
and yet they're both African. And
Well,
the
that's what I mean.
and that I just told you, that that I mean, there's plenty of that out there, like, and videos and lectures,
Sure.
and they but that I just told you is impossible for the public at large to even care, to even begin, because the problem is that how can it be that a Welsh guy, and I'm picking Welsh just for the heck of it, and a guy from some island out in the Pacific, it could be anywhere, Australia,
Hmm.
Australian are Aborigine,
Hmm.
both of them are equally as dispersed away from Africa genetically, stamp it with a rubber stamp, then but how can that be at the same time? Both of them be African completely. All three of them be African. Like how? And the end. The concept of that is that people left Africa and they formed their own little groups,
Hmm.
and it kept spiraling out. And the
And
genetics of
migrated, 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 and yeah.
and they kept migrating, and the genetics of the people that stayed in one place looked similar because they stayed in one place,
Hmm.
and the other ones looked similar to,
Oh,
but
and
they're all the same original DNA anyhow.
and that's what they're looking for when they do these DNA tests. Is they're looking for high concentrations of these specific markers, and we
That's
found
it.
these high concentrations are in this area of France
Yeah,
and on the Iberian Peninsula.
yeah, to a
So
degree.
that's how we can say we can kind of lump you in with these because that's what our data set shows. We have high concentrations
Yes,
of those markers here.
according to
Right.
their test
According to their test and their database, that's the thing.
and their data. If you go to FTDNA,
It's completely different. You
it
might
could,
get similar results,
right, roughly within the thing. Yeah,
but unless they're sharing databases or they're both using the same database, you're going to get slightly different results at the minimum. You may get
yeah,
wildly different results.
yeah. It's insane.
Hmm.
And that's why that part of it, because people want to know that, like, the thing updated recently,
Hmm.
the ancestry, and they dropped my Spain
Hmm.
and upped my French. Now I'm 14% French again.
Hmm. Well, as more data comes in, that may change again.
No, it
You
will
know,
change again because
and
I'm not 14% French, nor am I the 50 something percent Spain. Um, it's more like like a
Mhm.
gradient of mixture,
Right,
as opposed to here's your friend. There's no such thing as here's your friend. This is, it's not like that.
yeah,
But it's impossible to
yeah,
say that
yeah.
out.
They're not looking at the strand and going, well, here's your French DNA here, and there's your Spanish DNA. That's not how it works.
Yeah, that's what they're doing, but in order to get you a result, but that's not reality. Reality,
Correct.
what it is like a big mashed potato mix with chives,
Hmm.
and then say what part is French, You know, that's really the truth.
Yeah.
Your DNA is like a big blended Slurpee.
Hmm. Hmm.
How do you?
We always come back to Manitoba, man. Why you do that? See,
I like I like the idea of that it's all a big ass mess because it dispels a lot of even my own notions. It has,
yeah, yeah, I agree with you. We're all mutts. We're all mutts.
but very much so. It's such a shocking thing to even. It's been shocking to
Well,
me. Not that I fought it, but a little bit.
we've been
I fought it a
conditioned.
little bit.
We've
I
been
fought it a little
conditioned. Well, yeah, you know.
Well, the reason being is that at some point, I I really wanted to be 100% Spanish, but you
Well,
can't be 100% Spanish.
that's part of that's also part of our upbringing because I was told forever that I'm at least the majority Scottish. And now I find out that, well, Scottish starting in 1100 because some guy moved there. So people born after that were Scottish. But before that, you got to go back to Belgium and Luxembourg, modern day Belgium and Luxembourg, you know?
Yeah, but you know what's funny is, people are on about whether they're Scottish or whether they're French or
Hmm.
Spanish and stuff, and it's no, it's reasonable. But
It
what's
is. I think it
funny,
comes down to the culture that you're raised in. But go ahead.
what's funny is that in reality, or not in reality, at another level, we could also say, well, instead of saying Scottish or let's say Irish just all of them, well, you could also say, well, no, we're hunter gatherers to this degree,
Hmm.
and we're Scythian to that degree. Oh no, we're Hun. So like you could do that too, and so
Sure.
it's so endless. But people don't want to know that they're part Hun or. And by the way, Hun
Visigoth.
is everywhere.
Hmm.
Like like this Asian thing. It's across Europe. It's
Yeah.
everywhere. Like people that think that like 10 years ago, how we all used to think is that we didn't know any better. Um, it's funny. It's
Well, it's harkening back to that thing we were talking about earlier about how you can take all this information back to the past, but it's going to explode the worldview and totally disrupt what they know to be fact.
oh, it's gonna ruin. It's already ruined. Like there's no like let's say Ku Klux Klan member. There's no way for a Ku Klux Klan to be able to currently defend any of the notions for the past 200-300 years. There's no now they could defend it by obfuscating and whatnot,
Hmm.
but that concept is for, and they might like double down out of whatever, but there's no way with the amount of, and they could also excuse it by saying this is a conspiracy due to people from a
Well,
certain
sure,
part
you're
of
going
the
to come up with all kinds of excuses, but
and all that, but like those concepts, and on the other flip side of that, and I'm talking about like the American thing, the history of the this weirdness, the other people that say the inverse, talking about the Panther type people and all these people, it ruins it for like ultimately what might happen because nobody's going to be able to deny it at some point that they're all brothers and sisters. I mean, it sounds kumbaya,
well, but it's the truth.
but there's no such thing as hey,
But
we're superior than you or
dude,
there's none of that genetically speak. Well, then again, people still want to argue that in with like the bell curve, but
but
it
we
ruins it ruins the KKK, but it also ruins the Panther.
because because again we get back down to we have decided that we have decided what this person looks like, so they're that. We've decided that this person looks like, so they're that.
Yeah.
when basically when you put where the rubber meets the road, we're all just mutts hoping like hell we get 50,000 miles out of those tires where the rubber meets the road. And we're not, I mean, it is a hackneyed premise to say it. It's a cliche. It looks like it belongs on a Hallmark card, but we're all basically the same under the skin.
And we're incredibly different now. Well, we're
Yes,
we're the
we
same, but
are.
we're
Our
the same, but we're
cultures are
different.
different. Our cultures are different.
Yeah, but there's also, so the other screwed up thing that's not tenable
Mhm.
in terms of people processing it, because it takes, is that even though we're 99% the same at the same time, and it's all the same gene, or it's all the same segments of DNA but being rehashed,
Yes.
we're still different though.
Yes, we are on
So I'm
certain
different.
levels.
I'm different than you in this way, at least in this way. As an example, um, point number one. No, we're gonna do some stupid joke. I'm different in this way, as opposed to leaning more towards Northern European,
Hmm.
which is like Yamnaya, people that came from
Hmm.
Ukraine, actually. And this is all. I mean, this is all everywhere online. It could be, but people will be bored with it. But I'm more, even though we both share that ancestry anciently, I'm more farmer, Neolithic farmer than you are.
Yes, because I'm of a different, completely different haplogroup from you, and they have found that I'm more of the Neolithic stonemason, the stone cutters, they called them.
Let me say it this way: putting Y DNA to the side,
Hmm.
just as a whole, the oceans of people that surrounded. Now I don't know all the oceans of people that surrounded, but according to my DNA results, that lean in that direction, they were early Neolithic farmers.
Hmm.
The majority of them, the majority of yours, well, it could be from Neolithic, but you have more input from the later people, which were the people that came from Ukraine. The people that came from Ukraine, roughly area Russian areas, the steppe area, all the way from China, all the way, it's all from China all the way into Eastern Europe, into Ukraine, and all that. All those people that they 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 gave you your origin. They surrounded those people are more abundant in ancestry in the north, but in the south, the abundance is the people that came before them, which is the farmer people, Neolithic farmer people, the people that brought in cattle.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, not cattle. What do you call it?
agriculture.
Agriculture and whatnot. So, but now here's the thing: I have, through direct paternal and in all the branches, the people that dominate your rough surroundings. This is rough the mess. Uh, Rustimet, Rustimet,
Rough
estimate,
estimate.
rough estimate. But it's true. You could see the thing. Early Neolithic farmers, Yamnaya people, and that's just how Spanish people, Italian people, in general, they have more farmer ancestry. That's a difference, but that difference is a degree, because I also share the Yamnaya to a great degree. So Europeans as a whole are the same. You can plot them the same, but at the same time, you could plot them different, and you could break that down away from Africa. So depending on the lens of how you look at the spider's web, you can make everybody look different. Or the further out you look, everybody looks the same. It's so convoluted.
That's what I was trying to get at. But yes, we're all different to a degree, but we're all the same to a degree.
Yeah, it's the
So,
two, but nobody can, in general, that's a difficult concept to allow. You know what I'm saying? It's because it's
Well,
too much
you know,
variables.
they're going to have to get over it. So,
Well, the last thing I'll say,
yeah, we need to
um,
wrap it up. We've been 3 hours, dude.
yeah, last thing I'll say, there was a lady from, I don't know where this and that, that they fought another group of people for centuries. So she didn't want to have DNA from that other group of people, but it ended up that she was like really closely tied to that other group of people that she disliked, that they fought for who knows how long.
Oh, well.
And so to end it, I will say that these people where there's conflict right now,
Hmm.
their closest kin genetically, even though the one group spent a lot of time in Europe for thousands of years,
Hmm.
but you could still see it in their genes. Their closest kin are those people that are fighting each other,
Well,
genetically speaking.
well,
How crazy is that?
yeah. I mean, and that's where I keep coming back to this. Well, we can keep going forever and a day, but that's where I keep going back to this unreasonable hatred. And it is not reasonable. It's not normal.
No,
And we really got to let it go. We really got to stop it.
I think we are fine. It's the other
You
people.
and me, yes. But I don't trust any of them other son of a guns. That's why we have locks on our doors. So,
I think a little bit more putting our shoes our on what is it? Putting ourselves in other people's slippers slightly, even though that's hard to do, is better to consider. Man, what if that was me? I'm doing, I'm behaving this way to this person, but wait, what if they were behaving that way to me? Would I like? So why would I behave to them the way I would not want them to behave with me? You know what I'm saying? That kind of
yeah,
idea.
yeah,
But that's too simplistic because we're talking a nightmare of a scenario. But
yeah,
the intention is good. I would not want, I really don't want anybody to suffer nor to take from people. You know what I'm saying? But this world, this is what it is.
yeah. We really got to knock it off. We
All right.
really got to knock it off.
Any final words before we land it?
Yes, go do something nice for your neighbor. Go do something nice for your neighbor. You have a neighbor that needs help, and for one reason or another, can't ask for it. Go do something nice for a neighbor.
That's right.
Even if it's just throw the lid back on the garbage can after the garbage truck is gone. Do something nice for your neighbor.
Just as soon as hopefully people will lean towards doing things like that, or at best not inflict inflicting unnecessary whatnot. But then again, you know,
Yeah,
you're talking about responsible or reasonable
reasonable
people.
people.
Some people are just not reasonable. Yeah. And
Oh,
the thing is that one can be as terrible, one has in their power, because we're all human, to do the worst of things. It's true, but let's edge it towards, or try somehow to edge it towards, not being evil towards other people a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah. Just be cool and
All
mind
right,
your business.
mind your business. All right, folks, thank you for hanging out with us. This is the Trampled Underfoot podcast show. Your hosts are you did it the last time, but it's natural for me. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay. Damn, now I'm out. Your hosts are Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo. Mark Lindsay out in the west, Eloy here on the east. I just could say it. We go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. We have a show on. We here on. Oh, I'm all screwed up. I just swallowed a little bit. Um, we have a show here on YouTube where you're at. We also have a Facebook page, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, and a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. So go check those out. And we're sponsored by.
Harneal Media. Look, you need a website. That's all I'm going to say. You need a website. Talk to Steve Nealon at Harneal Media. If you don't have a website, it's 2023. What's the matter with you? Come on, get with the program. Come on. You need a website, you need a web store, you need merch, you need to talk to Harneal Media. They will hook you up. Competitively priced, 100% personalized service. Need I say more? There's a link to Harneal Media in every single episode on this YouTube channel. Click that link, go over, talk to Steve. He will set you up. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL, media.com, sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com.
All right, folks. Have a safe week. Enjoy yourselves. Don't get into any conflicts. We'll catch you here next week. Peace.
See ya. Push the button, Frank.